Just like you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
It's so nice to see all of you tonight, and thank you for coming out to join us for the first of 3 NRC meetings in southeastern New Mexico on the NRC's review of a license application that they received from Holtec International to build and construct an interim spent fuel storage facility in Lee County, New Mexico. And my name is Chip Cameron, and I'm going to be the facilitator for the meeting tonight. And in that role, I'll try to help all of you to have a productive meeting. The focus of tonight's meeting is on something called scoping. And scoping is a term that's used under the National Environmental Policy Act, a federal law that requires the preparation of an environmental impact statement in certain circumstances. And this is a circumstance that the NRC is preparing an environmental impact statement. So what does scoping mean? It's simple, really. It's what should be evaluated in the environmental impact statement? What doesn't need to be evaluated in the environmental impact statement? In other words, what's the scope of the statement? And the NRC staff is here tonight to hear any comments or suggestions you have on that matter. And there's 2 objectives tonight for the meeting. First objective for the NRC staff to clearly explain the NRC license review process to you. Second objective is for the NRC to have an opportunity to listen to your comments, your advice on the important issues. And those 2 objectives, they correspond to the 2 segments of the meeting, to the agenda of the meeting. First of all, we're going to hear from the NRC staff. They're going to explain the review process to you on this license application. And second part of the meeting is to hear public comment from all of you. And there's going to be a few minutes, and probably I should emphasize few, to see if there's any clarifying questions on the license review process, and I'm emphasizing process. See if we can answer some of those before we go on to public comment. We have an amazing amount of people who want to talk tonight, around 50 people, and usually I set a guideline of 5 minutes a speaker, but because there's 50 people, we're going to go to 4 minutes. And I apologize to those of you who I have to ask to finish your comments tonight, because I know that you've spent time and energy preparing comments and coming to this meeting. Now, fortunately, there are several other ways to comment, provide scoping comments to the NRC staff, and the staff will tell you how to do that. But basically, you can send a comment in writing. Even if you comment tonight, if you want to amplify on your comments, you're perfectly free to do that. So we have sort of a safety valve on that score for people to comment. And only 1 comment per person. Obviously, we won't go around for a second round, but it is 4 minutes. Try to be crisp in your comments, okay, so that we might get out of here at a decent time. Now, we are taking a transcript. We have a court reporter here, Matthew McMullen. Thank you, Matthew. Is here. He's taking a transcript. So that's going to be a formal record of everything that was said here tonight. And It's going to be publicly available to all of you on the NRC website, and I think we'll say a little bit more about how you will get into that. It's probably going to be 2 to 3 weeks before that transcript will be on there, but you'll be able to see it all. One important point is that the NRC staff is here to listen carefully to what you have to say. They're not going to be responding to your comments. They're not going to be responding to any questions that you have in your comments. Okay, but they will be reviewing those comments, including questions, when they evaluate the scoping comments. And NRC issues a scoping report that will also be on the website where they evaluate the comments that were given. So they're going to be carefully evaluating your comments and questions when they prepare the draft environmental impact statement, when they prepare the scoping report. Draft environmental impact statement is also subject to public comment, public meetings, so they'll be out here again with all of you. And I know that when we're in a situation where there's a company, a private enterprise that is a license applicant to the NRC, people understandably have a lot of questions that they'd like to ask the license applicant. Well, we do have Holtec staff here with us tonight, and they're going to be available after the meeting to talk with you, to tell you how you can contact them if you want to communicate with them. And I'd like to introduce Joy Russell. Joy, let me just stand up. Joy is the leader of the team from Holtec International. They'll be here to talk to you if you need to talk to them. In terms of the NRC presenters, the speakers tonight, we have 3 speakers. We have Cynthia Roman, who's right here. Now, she's chief of the Environmental Review Branch at the NRC, and it's in the Division of Fuel Cycle and Safeguards and Environmental Review in the NRC's Office of Nuclear Materials Safety and Safeguards. So Cynthia is the branch chief. The project manager for the environmental review of the Holtec application is Jill Catterley. And she's going to be talking to you about the process. And we also have our senior NRC official here, Brian Smith. He's the deputy director of the division, Fuel Cycle, Safeguards, Environmental Protection. He'll say a brief comment after Jill's done, but he'll also close the meeting out for us. I also want to introduce the main NRC staffers who are responsible for the safety review. And this is an important point, you're going to hear about it. When the NRC reviews the license application to see if it should be granted, there is an environmental review, Jill, Cynthia, and this is a scoping meeting on the environmental review, but there's also a safety review to see if the application meets the NRC safety regulations. And tonight, we have John McKiergan here, right here. And John is the branch chief where the safety review for this application takes place. Jose Cuadrado, he's the project manager on the safety review. They're here tonight so that if any of your comments fall more in the safety area rather than the environmental scoping area, they're here to listen, to know that you made those comments, to consider those safety issues as they do their safety review. Okay. We're fortunate to have the staff of 2 of New Mexico's congressional delegation here tonight. And Diane Ventura is right here, and Diane is with the Roswell office of Senator Heinrich. We also have Gloria Ann Salas. There's Gloria is with Representative Steve Pierce. So thank you for being here, and thank you for the attention of the congressman. Now, what I'd like to do is just, I don't think I need to say this, but I always like for all of us to remember courtesy, and I mean all of us, NRC staff, myself, whatever. You may hear comments tonight that you disagree with, but just respect the person who's giving that particular comment. Now, I'm going to go to Cynthia Roman, the branch chief, and she not only is going to give you an introduction to this, but she's also going to say a few remarks in Spanish to you. So I'm turning it over to Cynthia right now.
Thank you. I'm going to start with the Spanish portion. It's basically summarize what he said. Buenas noches, mi nombre es Cynthia Román. Yo soy la supervisora encargada del grupo que está haciendo el review, el impacto ambiental para la aplicación de Holtec. Ellos están solicitando una licencia para un periodo de 40 años. La presentación de esta noche será en inglés, pero una versión en español de esta presentación será añadida en la página de NRC, por sus siglas en inglés, y también tenemos copias de la presentación en español en la mesa del frente. Lo más importante de esta reunión es escuchar sus puntos de vista. Nosotros usaremos la información provista por ustedes para definir en más detalle las áreas a evaluarse en nuestro análisis de impacto ambiental. Mi grupo está justo empezando el análisis, su input es muy importante, recibir los comentarios de ustedes el día de hoy. Así que si ustedes prefieren comentar en el español, mi compañero José Cuadrado, que está aquí, él es el que está manejando la evaluación de impacto de seguridad, y él también habla español. Yo hablo español, puedo traducir los comentarios si alguien que prefiere traducir quiere hablar en español. Ahora voy a comenzar la presentación en inglés y muchas gracias por estar aquí esta noche. So, as Chief mentioned, staff in my branch is going to be working on the environmental review for the license application for Holtec. Our main goal today is to hear from you. So I'm going to try to be very brief in my remarks. First, I want to give you a very quick overview of what NRC does and what is our role in regulating the Holtec project. Our agency is charged by federal law to be the nation's only regulator of commercial nuclear materials, independently ensuring these materials are used, handled, and stored safely and securely. Our mission is to protect the public health and safety, promote common defense and security, and protect the environment by regulating the civilian use of radioactive materials. To accomplish our mission, we carefully review each license application we receive before making a decision on whether or not to grant the applicant's request. Next slide. NRC regulates the operation of 99 nuclear power reactors that generate about 20% of the electricity in the United States. We also regulate civilian use of nuclear materials, research reactors at universities, transportation of nuclear materials, and their storage and disposal. NRC strive to be open and transparent in their reviews. As such, stakeholders may have many opportunities to participate in public meetings on environmental and safety issues. This scoping meeting is one of those opportunities. As an independent regulator, the NRC determines whether it is safe to build and operate a storage facility at the proposed site. The NRC does not promote or build any nuclear facility. Also, we do not own or operate the facilities. Our mission, again, is to protect the public and the workers and the environment. Holtec is applying for a license to store waste. They are not asking NRC for permission to reprocess or generate more nuclear waste. NRC does not select the location for the storage facility. We just evaluate the impacts of building and operating the storage facility at the location proposed by the licensee. As we will explain later in this presentation, the results of our environmental review will be documented in an environmental impact statement, which is a public document. This analysis, along with other factors, will inform the basis for the staff decision to issue a license or not. This concludes my remark, and now Joe Caverly will provide additional details about the environmental review process.
That woke everybody up.
Thank you, Cynthia. So my name is Jill Caverly, and I'm the Environmental Project Manager for the review, and I'm assisted by Stacy and Bowden, who you might have met outside in the lobby. The next few slides will be specific to the Holtec storage facility application and review. Holtec has applied for a license to construct and operate a storage facility under 10 CFR Part 72. The NRC regulations governing storage of spent nuclear fuel and reactor-related greater than Class C waste. If granted, Holtec would receive a 40-year license to construct and operate the consolidated interim storage facility. The current application before the NRC requests construction and operation of only the first of up to 20 planned phases. In this current application, Holtec is requesting storage of up to 500 canisters of spent nuclear fuel. The spent nuclear fuel would come from shut down and operating nuclear power plants from around the country. Holtec anticipates applying for up to 20 phases of construction and operation of 500 canisters of spent nuclear fuel each, for a total of 10,000 canisters of spent fuel storage. However, these additional phases would require separate applications from Holtec and would be subject to their own safety and environmental reviews. The environmental report provides information on the full build-out of the site, or 10,000 canisters. Next slide, please. This slide shows the approximate location of the proposed consolidated interim storage facility in New Mexico. And as you can see, the facility is located approximately halfway between the cities of Carlsbad and Hobbs and Lee County. Next slide, please. Holtec plans to use the High Storm UMAX system for the storage of spent fuel. High Storm UMAX stands for the Holtec International Storage Module Underground Maximum Capacity, and is an NRC certified design, which means we have evaluated it and determined that it meets NRC regulations and can safely store spent fuel. The system is a dry, in-ground spent fuel storage system. Each of these modules holds 1 canister of spent fuel, and Holtec has applied for storage of 500 canisters of spent fuel. The canister transfer facility will be below ground. This is a low-profile design as seen in the conceptual drawing from Holtec's application. Next slide, please. This flowchart provides an overview of the license application review process, which can be described generally as a 3-parallel phase process. After the application is submitted to the NRC conducts an acceptance review to determine if the application has sufficient information to begin a detailed technical review. If so, the NRC dockets the application, and this begins the safety and environmental review paths. From the safety standpoint, we work through a separate safety review to decide if a license should be issued. The result of this phase of the review is a safety evaluation report. This is graphically represented in the left column of the flowchart, or the steps in orange. Jose Cuadrado, as we mentioned, will be the project manager coordinating that aspect of the review. The environmental review can be seen in the middle column, and the results of that are the environmental impact statement, which describes the impacts on the environment of the proposed project. On the right-hand side, you'll see the adjudicatory hearings. This blue box on the figure refers to the opportunity for the public to request a hearing on the application. These hearings would be held if a petition to intervene is granted. The results of these 3 processes, a hearing if granted, the results of the environmental review documented in environmental impact statement, and the safety review documented in a safety evaluation report will factor into the NRC's final decision on whether or not to grant the license to Holtec for the storage facility. It's important to note that the focus of tonight's meeting is on the environmental review process. Next slide, please. This flow diagram outlines the environmental review process, or the middle column of the previous slide. And as you can see, the opportunities for public involvement are highlighted in light blue. After staff receive an application, it is reviewed to ensure it is complete and technically adequate. And if acceptable, the application is docketed and we proceed on both the environmental and safety reviews. The NRC starts the environmental review by publishing a notice of intent, which informs the public of our plan to prepare an environmental impact statement and conduct the scoping process. The light blue box on the right identifies the current scoping process, which is the meeting tonight. The purpose of this phase is to gather more information to use to help us prepare our EIS. Comments gathered from this meeting, as well as many other information collections, will be independently evaluated for impacts of this particular project on the environment. We will document your comments today in the meeting transcript. The public can also provide written comments through the end of the scoping period. We analyze all the information gathered, will develop an EIS, and issue it for public comment. At that time, we again invite the public's comments on the draft EIS, and that's represented in the lower blue box. At that time, the staff will schedule a meeting, hear comments on the draft EIS. We'll again evaluate those comments and consider modifying the draft EIS before issuing a final EIS. The final EIS and the results of the safety review, otherwise known as the safety evaluation report, again contribute to our final decision. Next slide, please. Our environmental review is based on the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. NEPA requires federal agencies to apply a systematic approach to evaluate the impacts of its actions. For major federal actions, NEPA requires agencies to document their evaluation in the EIS. NRC will prepare the EIS in accordance with these regulations and guidance. NEPA also encourages public participation in the process. That's why we're here. We're looking for public input to our environmental review process. Next slide, please. So here's a graphical representation of the types and sources of information that NRC is gathering when we're preparing our EIS. We'll conduct a site visit, we'll meet with local and state officials and other federal agencies, and we'll also meet with tribes. We're currently gathering that information for scoping to help us determine which issues should be considered in our review. We also expect to request additional information from Holtec following the completion of these activities. Next slide, please. NRC will gather information on a wide range of topics related to the environmental issues. And this slide provides many of the resource areas we will consider in our environmental impact statement. So as you can see, we include many different resource areas, including transportation and environmental justice, groundwater, surface water, waste management, air quality, geology and soils. Next slide, please. This slide is a high-level timeline for our anticipated environmental review. This stepwise approach meets our responsibilities under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. We talked about it a little earlier. We started with the review with a notice of intent to conduct scoping and to prepare an EIS. This started a 60-day scoping period. This public meeting is part of that process, and we will continue to gather information and analyze information as the review continues and we develop the EIS. We tentatively expect to publish the draft EIS in June 2019. At that point, we'll publish a notice of availability, and that starts a period of at least 45 days for the public or other agencies to comment on the draft EIS. Those comments will also be addressed and the analysis adjusted if necessary. We tentatively expect to issue the final EIS in mid-2020. Next slide, please. So the scoping process is intended to do many things: to determine the scope of the EIS and identify significant issues that NRC should analyze in depth. Also, to identify and eliminate issues which are not significant. To identify other environmental reviews and consultation requirements related to the proposed action. So in other words, we want to hear from you because you live in the local area and may bring issues to our attention that we're not aware of. Next slide, please. The NRC is requesting information the NRC is requesting information and input specific to the proposed facility regarding what should be included or excluded from the scope of the EIS. Some examples of information that NRC are requesting are there local projects that are being planned or developed nearby? Have you identified wildlife or habitat that should be considered? Are there cultural resources that should be considered in the evaluation? Are there particular populations nearby that should be considered? Are there unique characteristics of the project site or local communities that NRC should consider in the evaluation? Next slide. So there are many ways that you can provide your scoping comments. You may present comments orally or in writing at this public meeting. You may submit comments through the regulations.gov website by searching for the docket ID listed here, and I'll just say it for the record. It's NRC 2018-0052, and submitting your written comments there. You may also mail comments to the address on this slide. Remember that all the comments should be submitted by May 29th in order to ensure that they will be considered. Next slide, please. So additional information on the application and review can be found on the federal rulemaking website or at the NRC's public document room through the NRC's agency-wide document access and management system, also known as ADAMS, or through the NRC's project-specific website for the Holtec application. And all those links are listed here. In addition, the public libraries in Hobbs, Carlsbad, and Roswell have agreed to hold a copy of the environmental report for public review. If you want to be on our mailing list or our email list, please make sure that your name and your address are provided to one of the NRC staff at the registration tables. This is the one way to ensure that you will be notified of upcoming meetings and issuance of the draft and final EIS. At the bottom of the slide are the NRC's points of contact. And just to remind you once again to please provide your comments by May 29th. And I'm going to turn this over to Brian Smith for comment.
Thank you, Jill. Good evening, and thank you for coming out tonight and attending our scoping meeting. My division, the Division of Fuel Cycle Safety, Safeguards, and Environmental Review, has a responsibility for leading and conducting and preparing this environmental impact statement. It's a responsibility that we take very seriously. We encourage and welcome your comments tonight on the scope of the NRC's EIS. The NRC's job is to protect the public health and safety and the environment by thoroughly reviewing each license application we receive before deciding whether or not to grant an applicant's request. We understand that in the audience tonight, there are those who may oppose Holtec's license application, as well as those who may support it. I want to assure you that we want to hear from both sides. However, I want to remind you that the purpose of this meeting is to gather comments for the scoping of our EIS. We want to know what important information and issues we need to consider and analyze in our EIS. We treat all the comments we receive the same, whether a comment was made by one person or by 100 people. We give each comment we receive the same careful consideration during the preparation of our EIS. We will consider all the oral and written comments we receive here tonight, as well as those we receive via letter, email, or through the federal rulemaking website, regulations.gov. The EIS, combined with NRC's safety and security review of Holtec's license application request, will result in an NRC licensing decision to either approve the license request or disapprove it. And to allow as much time as we can for public comment, I'll turn it over to Chip. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia and Jill and Brian. As I mentioned earlier, we have a few minutes to see if there's any clarifying questions on the process, the review process that we could answer. And I wondered, does anybody have a question? Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Here, let me give you this so they get you. It's not.
I can do that.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying anything. But it's not so people can hear you, so we get it on the transcript.
Oh, that's
That's
fine.
why it has to be
Well,
on.
my question is what is with the police presence? They come in, they go out, they circle the room, they stare us down. I'm afraid, no offense, honey. I'm afraid, I mean, what is going on? I'm trying not to wiggle too much, and not too hard. Serious, what is with the police presence? We're highly educated, reasonably intelligent people. Why all the cops? What are you guys gonna do?
Well, there are several paddy wagons outside waiting for you.
But you know, could they take a
No,
chill pill?
no, it's, and I have to tell you that Chief Newberry and his people have been very helpful all night in terms of making sure that, for example, the NRC staff leave if they need to. So the NRC, and I'll answer this process question for the NRC, is that when we go to public meetings, we sometimes encounter people who may be violent, okay? I know you find that hard to believe.
Starts at the White House.
Where?
But that's why we have security. And in this case, when and I have to thank the university, when we're using a space at the university is going to want to make sure if it's a meeting on a controversial subject, they're going to want to make sure that they have their security staff here in case something does happen. So we'll all take a chill pill. Okay, so I'm going to go on to other questions, and I'm going to go to Kevin Camps in the back, and we'll come up to you next. Okay? And this is Kevin Camps. Kevin.
Hi, Kevin Camps with Beyond Nuclear, and I had this question last Wednesday, but didn't get to ask it because there was no time. Twice now I've heard Cynthia Roman say that NRC is not a promotional agency, but I attended a Spent Fuel Project Office regulatory conference in North Bethesda where Tony Sia, who was acting director at the time, said, "Together we can get this done," speaking about centralized interim storage. And that was just a few years ago. So tremendous concern that, at least for him that day, this was something he wanted to get done. So can you address NRC's role? Has NRC ever denied a permit for something like this in its history?
And thank you for that question. And that is a process question because it goes to the neutrality of the NRC review. So thank you, Kevin. Is there, I don't know if Brian, if you can talk to Tony's remark, but you can certainly clarify what the NRC position is.
Yes, I was not at the conference that you're referencing, so I don't know the context in which Tony made that remark. Tony Shaw is still the Deputy Director of the Division of Spent Fuel Management. The division has the lead for the technical safety review of this license application. Our role is, as Cynthia said a couple of times, is not a promoter of the industry. As I mentioned in my remarks, our job is to protect public health and safety environment, to making sure that the applicants and the licensees meet our regulations so that they can be protective of their workers, the public, and the environment itself. You had a question about have we ever denied or turned down an application like this in the past? I'm not aware that we have. There's only been 2 other applications that I'm aware of. One was private fuel storage, in which we did issue a license back in 2006. The facility was never constructed. We did receive the waste control specialist license application. That has been on hold for some months now. And now we've received the Holtec license application.
So there haven't been many, but thank you, Kevin, for that, and thank you, Brian, for clarifying that. And yes, ma'am, could you just please tell us your name, too?
My name is Charlene Hernandez, a concerned citizen, and I just want to ask you a question. If the person is here that's applying for the license, the agency or whatever?
Yes, I introduced Joy Russell, who's right back there, and she's here with 2 of her colleagues. And in fact, Joy, like, you know, Holtec International, like anybody else here, can sign up for their time to speak. So she's going to speak later on, and you'll be able to hear her and know who she is. Okay, thank you. Let me go here, and then we'll come up to you. Yes.
Chip, as you know, I'm Lon Burnham, and I had 18 years in the Texas legislature, so I'm real familiar with bureaucraties. But I'm still struggling with the concept of bifurcating health and safety with the EIS. To me, they're kind of interrelated, and I'm not sure how to frame my comments, since I think health and safety are the most important environmental issues.
And that's a very good point. Because there's separate reviews, but there'll be information probably in the environmental review that has safety implications. And I heard a good discussion of how that works. And John, are you gonna talk to that? Because people need to know that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that question. So this is John McCurgan. I'm chief of the licensing branch. And I think there are 2 very important points to differentiate the environmental review and the overall licensing process. And so it really has its roots in the statutory requirements that both of these review processes are seeking to comply with. One is based, as you heard, in the Environmental Policy Act, and the other, of course, is based in the Atomic Energy Act. And those 2 statutory requirements work together, and the NRC implements both of those to achieve an overall finding when we issue the license. But the NRC is working towards ensuring compliance with all of the relevant statutes there. As Chip mentioned, the environmental review and the safety review often touch on very similar concepts and themes. Certainly, siting characteristics, soil characteristics, for example, are one that impacts both the environmental review and the safety review. And we talk quite commonly amongst the reviewers to make sure that the information is shared across those 2. So even though the processes are somewhat unique, there is a great deal of connection between those 2 activities.
Thank you very, very much. And that last part about the consultation between the review environmental staff and safety staff is a very, very important one. Yes, sir.
Aldo Carrasco, and I live here in Roswell, New Mexico, and somehow managed to live.
Safety staff is a very, very important one. Yes, sir.
Aldo Carrasco, and I live here in Roswell, New Mexico, and somehow managed to live here since 1974. In a couple of slides, the word interim was included in there. And it's interesting because my background's in linguistics. Believe it or not, I didn't waste my time at New Mexico State. And there, in the field of linguistics, you have what's called gradable ambiguity. And some people would define, for instance, the climate in here as cold. Others may say cool. Others may say warm. So right now, this university, if I'm not mistaken, has an interim president until they find a suitable replacement. So we know there will be, eventually, another president. When we talk about interim storage, who gets to stipulate the limits? Who gets to define that word? Will it be Holtec? Or will it be you guys? Or will it be the voters? But there has to be more accuracy in the definition of the word interim. Because I used to be a member of Concerned Citizens of Roswell, and we were concerned that this would happen eventually, that they would bring spent nuclear rods and store them here indefinitely. So if you could possibly, one of you define the length of time, please.
Okay, thank you. Very important question, and I don't know where the term interim actually originated, okay, but Jill, Cynthia, Brian, I think you see what the concern is behind the question. And there may not be something that we really, it may be a larger issue than the NRC, but John, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, thank you, if I could. So the application as put forward is for 40 years. And now we do need to be clear and candid, right? There are opportunities to renew that license for an additional 40 years. But that is the interim concept that's being put forward today as a 40-year license. A renewal would be subject to further review by the NRC staff. But that's the term that's put forward here.
And, you know, on that particular issue, all of us NRC citizens, you sort of have to follow what the Congress is doing in terms of connections between storage facility and Yakima or wherever the repository, if there is a repository. So that's sort of the game we're in. And great question. We have time for one more, and there's a gentleman back there that we're going to go to on this. Yes, sir.
Yes, you're asking for names, addresses, and contact information of everyone who signs in here in the front. And that is all the information that you have and the knowledge you have. And knowledge is power. So may I suggest that as soon as this meeting is over, you post these lists on the internet so that we all have exactly the same information that you, NRC, and Holtec have.
Hey, there's a recommendation. Okay. We're going to go to public comment now. We have a lot of comments. I'm going to start with people from Albuquerque, from Midland, Texas, from Las Cruces, New Mexico, who have long travel. So we're going to go to these people first. Okay?
Sir, Sister Joan came with some people that have to leave tonight. If her group could speak first, that would be.
You know what? That's exactly who I was referring to.
All right.
How about that? Jesus. Okay. And in fact, we're going to start with Sister Joan. Where's Sister Joan? And I'm going to put this here. Okay, Sister, and you can talk to the NRC. The people will be able to hear you. If you want to turn.
Just keep it here that way everybody can see. And
Oh, there you go.
There's
Great idea, microphone.
Okay, go ahead.
Bring the mic.
Who's the timekeeper?
Me.
So you
Now, I'm going to tell you, Sister Joan, and don't use your 4 minutes now. Sister Joan, I'm going to tell you at 3 minutes to sum up, okay?
It doesn't go there.
Okay, everybody here? Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Sister Joan Brown, JOANBROWN, and I live in Albuquerque. I'm the Executive Director of New Mexico Interfaith Power and Light, and I'm a Franciscan sister. And I'm very happy to be here in this part of our state, in this desert place, which is quite beautiful, actually. And I come from a long tradition, in Christian tradition, of people going to the desert, not because it was a throwaway place, or a place where nobody lived, or was not important, but because that is where people find God, and that is where we find our souls, and we meet our souls and ourselves in a very deep place. So those of you coming from back east, I welcome you these days to uncover that and discover that here as well as our friends from Holtec who do not live here in the state as well. So as a Franciscan sister in my Catholic tradition, there are several things that are really important. One is that we are brothers and sisters to everyone and everything, every element. Again, there is no out there. There is nothing that is waste. There is nothing that is to be thrown away or discriminated against. We're also called to use privacy of conscience, which means to follow the law of God inscribed in our hearts. And that is a moral law, and a law that is high, that we need to choose to do what is right. Also within my tradition, there are some environmental justice principles that we hold that I think are important for the NRC to understand. Human life and dignity, that every human life is important. It doesn't matter if you live in an urban area or if you live in a rural area. A life is a life, and none are dispensable. We need to be concerned about the safety and health of all lives. And in this state, we have a history of that not being respected. We have many people dying of cancer, and who are downwinders, who are suffering from uranium mining. And we are very skeptical because we do not want to see this continued. And that is why we are concerned with this new proposed Holtec project. We're called to be stewards of creation. That means to be caretakers, like your gardens at home. How many of us would put nuclear waste into my garden, which I just planted my tomato plants in? I do not think so. It is holy ground. We have an obligation to future generations for beyond I can even imagine. In terms of religious traditions, 250,000 years that we're dealing with this nuclear waste is eternity. It's an eternity. There is a concept of spirit of subsidiarity, which really addresses environmental justice. And this project is proposed in one of the poor areas of the state, a predominantly Hispanic-speaking area, and very low-income area. As if people here are not intelligent, do not have a voice, and cannot say, yes, we want something, or no, we don't. It speaks of, again, human life, and it is not just for economic gain for a few individuals or a few companies.
Sister, could I have you sum up now?
Okay. So these are a few of the concerns. I do have some suggestions, and I'll make those very brief, that the storage site for this needs to stay where it is at the nuclear power plants where it is already stored. Second, we need a longer comment period and in other locations in the state, because this will be transported throughout the state and affect many of us. And finally, that we need to have all the information, adequate resources, including financial verifications and analysis. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Sister. Sister Marlene Perot, okay. How about Carol Merrill? And here's, Carol, do you want to use this microphone up here? Thank you.
Hey, Chip, do you think you can expedite this so we can all get to speak? Because at this rate, it's not gonna happen.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
2 hours, 10 minutes. Could you expedite this so we can all get to speak? I mean, maybe have people.
You're all going to get to speak.
Well,
And we're trying to expedite it as much as possible.
Excuse me, sir, 4 minutes.
And this has taken time too, you know,
So
so
at 4 minutes.
thank
It's
you.
not gonna happen. Call the next name so they're ready.
Okay, go
Call the
ahead.
next 3 names.
Thank
so
you.
that-
Oh, come on, you guys,
My name
please.
is Carol Merrill, a retired librarian and teacher from Albuquerque. I'm a published author and I've been a member of CARD, Citizens for Alternatives to Radioactive Deposit Dumping, for 30 years. I wish you were having public meetings in Santa Fe and Albuquerque so that more citizens could voice concerns in person. friends live in Cerrillos, New Mexico, 1 block from a railroad. They want to say to you, leave the high-level waste where it is. Another of my friends owns a newspaper north of Albuquerque in the village of Corrales, the Corrales Comment, where I work as a freelance reporter. He is unable to be here because it's deadline day. He wants to say, this is important. Back in the 70s and 80s, New Mexican citizens were repeatedly reassured that locating the waste isolation pilot project, WIP, would not lead to the deposit of high-level waste in New Mexico. This current proposal is an unconscionable breach of those promises, never to allow this to happen. This is inexcusable. From my concerns, personally, there is no way to justify hauling high-level nuclear waste across thousands of miles of aging train tracks, endangering countless communities. The canisters that Holtec is trying to get the government to pay for are defective. For one, they are not able to withstand the high temperatures of southern New Mexico. An engineer who studied Holtec specifications for their proposed canisters told me this. Is this correct? I need to know that. I want it on paper, one way or the other. The temperature around southern New Mexico sometimes reaches 120 degrees, and their canisters are not effective at that high temperature. The canisters will be 12 inches up out of the ground. Perhaps this project was not well planned. The spent fuel rods are from power plants mostly on the East Coast. We did not even receive benefit from the electricity that was generated. If the nuclear waste is so safe for us here, why don't the people around the nuclear plants keep it there? The best solution is to leave high-level waste near where it was generated. It is important to have effective sealed storage on site where it is now, without exposing millions of people along railroads to deadly high-level waste and ineffective canisters. One additional concern, if there would be a serious example, for example, a derailment in a heavily populated urban area with a breach of the seal on the canister necessitating a mass evacuation, with an area becoming uninhabitable for a long, long time, think Chernobyl,
And could you sum up
Fukushima,
for us, Karen, please?
who would be liable, I'm almost done, is Holtec willing to be responsible should an accident occur? Do they have good insurance? If they are not liable, if they go bankrupt, how can we as citizens expect them to invest in an effective canister? I have 3 more sentences. They require an act of Congress. They require an act of Congress to proceed. What they're doing now is illegal. That is out of the question. Time to reconsider. This proposition is unacceptable. 1 more sentence. For our energy concerns in this great nation, it is time to employ natural genius to find more elegant, safe generators using wind, sun, water, tide, solar, geothermal for starters. Thank you for listening.
Bravo. Thank you, Carol. And I'm going to follow the recommendation of the gentleman in the back. I'm going to call a few names so that you know you're coming up. And we have 3 people here from Interfaith Power and Light from Albuquerque who signed up. They didn't give the last name. One of them did, but Tom, Stephen, and Judy Smith. And then we have a group of 5 coming up. And is this Tom?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Tom Gorman, and I live in Santa Fe County. And I came down here tonight just because I felt very strongly about this project. I have a background in emergency management. I was an emergency manager for a number of years in Colorado Springs. And then when I moved to New Mexico in 1992, I worked at the State Office of Emergency Management for 14 years, doing emergency planning. And everything I can see about this project tells me it's not properly planned. I agree with the gentleman that brought up the idea of interim storage. Interim is an interesting concept for something that might last 120 years. in emergency planning, we didn't think along those terms. We always had if we were doing an interim plan, we had a permanent plan in mind that we started working on. That isn't happening right now. So I'm very much opposed to this, and I don't want to go over the same comments others have made, but I'm very concerned on all of the risks that are expected to be handled by the people of New Mexico, along the rail routes, around the communities, near the site. And so for that reason, I'm very much opposed to this. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Gorman. And Stephen from Interfaith Power and Light is here, and then Judy Smith.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Biga, and I am from Albuquerque as well. We were greeted earlier this afternoon by the mayor, who was unable to then stay on because he said family is first. I make my passage here this evening because my family is first too. And that family is not just my immediate family, but my New Mexican family and my creation family. This is an old place. People have inhabited this land for many, many years, longer than where people who have helped create this nuclear waste come from. And that cannot be forgotten. And it made me grateful to hear that you said that there would be conversations with the elders here, because it is important in New Mexico that we speak to our elders. That has been lost in many places, but that is not lost here in New Mexico. And the due diligence calls us, not as people of privilege, to come in and do what we think is best, but as you have said, to listen, and to listen closely, and to listen carefully to the people who can tell us what 120 years means to them. In the Native tradition, they speak of 7 generations. We make decisions based upon 7 generations, which, interesting enough, is kind of your 120-year model. And so I appeal to each of you to draw from a deep place of your own wisdom. I come forth as well remembering my father, who died less than a year ago. And he said sometimes that in your gut, when you know something just doesn't sound right, you got to believe it. And this is one of those where in my gut, and I think in many people's guts, this just isn't right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Judy Smith is coming up, but we're going to go next to a group of 5: Randy Prude, Jim Carlisle, Cody Rogers, and Steve Schaefersman. Go ahead.
Welcome.
It's a Judy Smith.
So, hello, everyone. My name is Judy Smith. I, too, am also living in Albuquerque. I've been in New Mexico since 1979, and I love New Mexico with all my heart. And when I heard about this project, I thought about not only the 120 years of the temporary storage, because time matters. And it made me think back to the time when my congregation, I belonged to Congregation Albert, which is a Jewish Reformed congregation that was established in New Mexico a little bit more than 120 years ago. And so we've incorporated the wisdom of the state into our own traditions, and it made me think more and more about the passage of time, and that what's temporary to some may not be the long view that we need to take. For example, my religion, according to our scripture in the Old Testament, we received the wisdom of God from Mount Sinai 5,778 years ago, and that tradition was discovered in the desert, so I take that as symbolic. But I wanted to mention Genesis 2, chapter 2, verse 15, which says that not only will we as humans rule over the earth, but we are called on to tend it and keep it. And those thoughts have guided us for these 5,778 years. And sometimes we've been successful and sometimes not. In this case, I think we need to take a long view in order to be sure that we're successful. And I call success being actions that keep in mind justice for the people of our state, for all of us who live in this beloved enchanted land, justice for the state itself and for the land, and justice for the next generations in years to come. And we need to think about the impact of these decisions on the next generations. I'm asking for some actions that have already been mentioned, including time for comments and accessible locations for people across the state. Thank you.
Amen.
So thank you. Thank you, Judy. And this is Steve Schaefersman. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, NRC, for scheduling this unscheduled scoping session tonight. I am a consulting scientist in Midland. I work in both the petroleum and environmental industries. In Midland, I live downwind from a potential burning interim waste site with its radioactive plume. I can't think of I have taught environmental science and environmental geology and environmental law. I'm very experienced in sites, waste sites. I've been to 6 different Superfund sites in Houston where I got my PhD at Rice, and I know I've been opposed to these sites from the beginning. I can't think of a worse place. Well, I can, but it's hard to think of a worse place to choose for placing an interim waste site than right here. The area is surrounded by aquifers, some close, some far. The sediments in the sedimentary rock are porous and permeable. The thin barrier they claim is being on the top is not sufficient. It's just like the WCS site, which is really no better. So this is not a good place to put a hazardous waste site, especially one for nuclear waste. I could go into much more detail about these since I am a geologist and understand this stuff, but I'm not. The exposed casks on the surface are subject to terrorism. They are exposed, and a simple attack with heavy explosives would create that burning plume that I spoke of without much difficulty. There are soluble rocks below the site, limestone and rock salt. There is karst limestone in the area, which is a soluble limestone that develops caverns. The caverns collapse and sinkholes develop. It is conceivable that a sinkhole would collapse and take down the depository with it, which would be a terrible, colossal tragedy. In addition, there's the soluble Salado Formation below that. In West Texas, unplugged wells carry fluids to this formation. The salt dissolves and sinkholes develop. This is a matter of fact. Now, I can't be sure how close these are to the aquifers, but there is several aquifers nearby, especially the Capitan Reef Aquifer. I need more detailed maps to be sure, but that's the aquifer that has developed Carlsbad Caverns. This is just not a good place to site this. What about transportation issues? You always have to do a risk-benefit analysis. There is a risk to transporting these hazardous materials. 10,000 canisters is calculated in a risk-benefit analysis that there would be 1 accident. That would be a terrible calamity. If you double that transportation to move it a second time, that would double the risk. You would have possibly 2. You might have none, but you might have 4. It's just a statistical calculus. Is the risk ever acceptable? Yes. If you transport the waste once to a permanent waste depository, the risk is acceptable, and that's what should be done.
Steve, could you sum up for us, please? Thank you.
So, why was the site put here, proposed for this place, or for that matter, the one in Andrews County? The companies want to exploit the region's assumed favoritism for free enterprise and business. They also want to use who they think are people who don't care much about dangers, but just want to get the jobs. In fact, the jobs are very few, and the dangers are enormous. The oil companies provide plenty of jobs now, so this is not a good situation. The reason for this proposal is that there is a fund of $50 billion that the companies want to use to develop their waste sites. It is likely the interim site, if approved, would become a permanent site for two reasons. First, there would be no more motivation to develop a permanent site because the companies would no longer have title. The government would. And second, by that time, the $50 billion would be gone because they would be using that money to transport the waste. So I want to make a modest proposal, my last sentence. I propose that we look for a good site, which would be hard igneous rock that is not porous and not permeable, bore into it, place the casks there, call that the interim site, and then in 120 years, change the name to the Permanent Waste Repository. That would solve all of our problems. Thank you very much.
All right, my name is Cody Rogers. I'm going to be brief as I can possibly. I can't live in front of NRC. I'm an ex-Navy nuke. I've operated nuclear reactors for 8 years. I'm a huge proponent of nuclear power. I think we need it. We need to go to France's model. Ladies and gentlemen, I was called here today to, along with my friends from Midland, to talk about this issue. This is a major, major, major problem in the United States right now. We have 99 operating nuclear reactors. We do not have anywhere to dispose of the spent fuel, okay? This is a major, major problem, and we have to fix it. I believe the NRC is doing their absolute best to fix this problem. We have been, as Navy nuclear operators, we've been transporting full reactors across state lines on railroads for over 60 years successfully without accident or failure. Now, let me get to the main point that I'm here today. I don't know what you guys have seen when it comes to the studies of the geological parts of Midland, Texas, but we're on the cusp of being the world's largest energy producer. Okay, we are going to control oil very soon. We're going to control our own destiny. So West Texas is one of the most valuable places in the world right now, especially in the United States. And unfortunately, because of this, I implore you to look up Dr. Zong Lu's study from SMU. This is very, very new. West Texas is sinking. We're not sinking slowly. We're sinking at a rate of 4 inches per year. As a matter of fact, it's sinking so fast, we've actually had a lake near Pecos. It's a 4,000 square mile area that is literally sinking beneath us. I know we need a site. This is not it. If this thing sinks and we get something like the WIP accident that was never supposed to happen, that was a non-serialized container of radioactive waste that they had no clue what was in it and had to re-dig up to find out, we can't re-dig these canisters up. And if it sinks below us and we lose them, the environmental impact is forever. And if we lose West Texas oil and natural gas, the people of Roswell, the people of New Mexico, the people of Texas, the United States, we're done. We're not going back to Saudi Arabia and getting their oil.
Okay. Addie.
I want to, reinforce the comments that Ed made about economic development, whether this is economic development or not. I have an article here from San Onofre, who has nuclear waste that wants to see it leave their area, and some people may be happy for it to come here. This article says, in the search for finding a place to move the 3.55 million pounds of nuclear waste from the San Onofre nuclear generating station. One question always comes up. Sure, it would be great to send all that spent fuel as far away from the beach as possible, but who would ever be willing to accept it? On Thursday night, those attending the quarterly meeting of this community engagement panel heard from representatives of a private entity wanting to do just that. That person says one person's waste is another person's most valuable possession. And the ELEA Energy Alliance wants to build a massive nuclear storage facility in the desert of southeast New Mexico. He goes on to say, we think it's an important project for us in terms of jobs and capital investment in our part of the state. Unless the NRC can assure us that in transporting 10,000 canisters of high-level nuclear waste across the country, handling 18 canisters, in doing that we will never have an accident. I want to say that while the Energy Alliance is looking for jobs and capital investment in our part of the state, that one accident could take out jobs and capital investment of whatever economy is there. All of the infrastructure that has been built for the oil and gas industry, for the ag industry, and for every other enterprise going in southeastern New Mexico, one spill can eliminate all that. I was asked when I came in here to show the contents of my purse to one of our security people, in case, this is what she said, in case I had something in it that could do harm to someone else. And I thought that's an interesting when we're going to be discussing one of the most dangerous potential things on the planet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joy Russell from Holtec International. Joy?
Hi, good evening, everyone. As Chip said, my name is Joy Russell. I'm the Vice President of Business Development and Communications for Holtec. Been there for over 21 years. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to meet you. I had the opportunity to meet several of you earlier at the open house. I appreciate the open dialogue. We'll be here after to continue the dialogue, should you choose to do so. Be happy to provide to you facts about our high store facility, facts about storage of spent nuclear fuel, transportation of spent nuclear fuel. I come here asking for your support. I appreciate the sign. Could you put it down because I like to see? Thank you, because I know what it says. I like to see what everyone looks like. Thank you. Our partner, the ELEA Alliance, members of that alliance are here tonight, was formed in 2006 to help you diversify the area, the economics of the area, and to help encourage economic growth in the area, and we're happy to be a part of that. Holtec International, my company, is a strong technology company. Our core business has been and is the safe storage of spent nuclear fuel, and has been for the past 32 years. 60% of the nuclear plants in the United States safely use our dry storage equipment every day with no issues, no incidents. We're very happy, we're very proud of that. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission has licensed all of those systems, and they regulate the systems. They regulate the industry very rigorously. All of the equipment that we supply from Holtec is made here in the United States. We're an American company. We have 3 manufacturing facilities here in the United States, and we are the largest exporter of nuclear products. We have factories in Ohio, Pittsburgh, and in Camden, New Jersey. We're an American company, we're very proud of that. We have an impeccable safety record. None of our equipment has ever experienced a safety issue, leaked as you so call it, but I would like to point out, spent nuclear fuel is not a liquid, it can't leak.
Woo! What about the helium? Can emit radiation.
Okay, let's allow Joy to finish her remarks.
Thank you. The members of ELEA had asked Holtec to be their partner in 2013 after performing a very rigorous evaluation about the safety and security of our dry storage system. Our storage system stores the canister completely below grade. Unlike what we've heard here this evening, it does not sit 12 inches above the ground. I ask that you guys come and talk to us, come and get the facts. You need to listen to both sides of the story before you make your decision. That's your prerogative, I understand that. Okay, we've asked the NRC to review our license application. The NRC will perform a rigorous evaluation and review, taking into consideration all of your comments this evening. And we look forward to that review and responding to any information that is requested of us. The people here in the state of New Mexico are very well versed in technology. You have a very technically savvy state, especially in the nuclear technology industry, with 2 national laboratories, both with offices in Carlsbad. You have 3 Air Force bases, 1 Army base, and in this particular area of New Mexico, you also have WIP and Urenco. The geology, the site characteristics, environment, and other factors in this region are actually ideal and very well suited for the storage of spent nuclear fuel.
Cave country.
Our goal is to offer a temporary, safe, and secure used fuel storage facility to store the nation's used nuclear fuel. We commit to be good stewards of the environment and also good neighbors.
And if you could just sum up for us, Joy.
Absolutely. I look forward to speaking with any of you that wish to speak with us. Again, my colleagues and our partners from ELEA will be in the adjacent room after. Thank you very much for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you very much. Dan Holland, and then Karen. Oh, come on, Karen.
I wore this for y'all.
All right, Karen.
Yeah, you're using your time. You can do it.
I left my notebook up there. I apologize. I'm sorry, ma'am. I left my notebook up there.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's my fault.
Okay, I hope that didn't go down
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say reset.
Okay, thank you so very much. I want to thank the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for this opportunity to speak to you this evening. And thank you, Ms. Russell, and all of the people from Holtec. I know y'all folks are not bad people. I know you're not. And you don't mean to do any harm personally. And when I understand that, and all the other folks here understand that y'all are not bad people. But one accident could just blow the whole game. And even though it may not be your fault, or it could be a slip, or something, could happen, who knows? Accidents happen. And it could just ruin the whole ballgame. And we didn't make this. We didn't make this stuff. This stuff is made on the East Coast. It's made on the West Coast. We didn't make it. We didn't benefit from it. I don't believe that it should come here. I live in Odessa. I live 202 miles away from here. Although I live very close to Andrews, and that's another thing that we're talking about. I just don't think that it's a good idea to move this, to have an interim site. I think we need to have a permanent site if y'all are gonna move it at all, okay? The karst topography, huge. Just like the gentleman was saying, this place is sinking. Y'all really need to take a look at what's going on with the earth. That alone, without any even accidents of human causes, nature has got a really big thing to do with this, that none of us have control over. None of us, only that guy up there, or her, whoever, has got a big thing to do with this. And that, also, we got bad people who might want to drop a bomb, human, domestic, enemies, domestic, foreign. And the oil, we are the largest, the Permian Basin has got the largest oil field in the country. If anything happens to that, like that guy was saying, we're shot, okay? The rail cars, we have got antiquated rails. And the infrastructure, the bridges, our bridges are D-minuses. How are we gonna get that heavy stuff across there? I mean, we're not thinking about this stuff. Notification, all the cities that are these rail cars are going through. These people really need to be notified. They need to have a say in this. We need to, people in New Orleans and Mobile, Alabama, and Charlottesville, North Carolina, they all need to have a hearing like we're having. They're important too. I mean, our lives out here have just as much meaning as those lives do on the East Coast. And if they want to get rid of it, why is my life less important than theirs? You gotta follow the money. I mean, no offense to y'all folks at Holtec. I'm sorry, but y'all people can come in here and build this thing, make money, 40 years later, you're gone.
And Cynthia, could you sum up for us?
Yes,
too?
sir.
Thank you.
And the stuff could still be here. The permanent site may not be built. We don't know. We don't know into the future. And, the people who also live here and have got the jobs there, we have to stay here. Our lives are here. So there's so many things that we haven't thought of yet. It's just not thought out yet. We need to think some more about this before we do it, please. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And I usually don't do this. Oh, good. I wanted to make sure that my NRC colleagues did not miss anything that you had to say, so I was going to call a bathroom break. But I think that's being taken care of. So how about, I guess Dan Holland is not here anymore. How about Timothy Jennings? Timothy. And then Thomas Jennings. And Sean McDaniels, Rhonda Suderman King. Okay. Go ahead, Timothy.
I'm Timothy Jennings. I've been an elected official in this area for 38 years. Representing, I'm probably one of the only elected officials here when they had the hearings on WHIP. My brother is also here. We both attended the hearings on WHIP. And I would just tell you, for something that started out as being nothing more than transuranic waste, nothing but gloves and equipment, we seem to have gone a little further upstream than what they were told us then. Now, I would just tell you, in any public hearing, I hope our congressional delegation will be informed of the matter in which this public hearing has been held. Number one, anybody who comes to a public hearing should be able to be free to express for or against any idea without any fear of anyone clapping, any retribution, anybody saying anything. They should have that. And that has not happened here. If you want to have a public hearing in Albuquerque, have it. But don't come to Roswell and tell the people that in Roswell that they have to wait for 3 hours or 4 hours more than they were supposed to come to a public hearing. When it's 4 to 7, it should have been 4 to 7. And you know, I'm just saying, NRC needs to be honest with us. And they certainly weren't honest when they said WIP was nothing more than transuranic waste. It has not that look at it today. It's not there, but that's exactly what they said, and we have films. I think Pete White filmed it. So just look at that. Now, I'm going to tell you that I think when you look at this stuff, look at what you're doing, and come back and have a public hearing that is meaningful, and not one that comes in here and it's so mishmashed. Our university here has a place with 400 seats in it. Everybody could be there and sit in there. Everybody could see everything that you put on display up there. Nobody else in the back of the room, only the first 3 rows can see that stuff. You know what? Do a decent public hearing. If you're a government employee, you should look after all of us, and not just the ones that you want to look after. Now, you know, I'm going to tell you, I haven't complained much about WIP or anything else in all my times with Mr. Heaton. I haven't said a whole lot about WIP being so bad or anything else. WIP's here because we had very little political clout when it happened. That's why we got it. And so we're making the best of it. But, you know, this thing here it's 50 miles from our ranch. And like other people from Midland and Texas and everything, you know, I don't have a 160,000 acre ranch. I have one I share with my 5 other brothers and sisters. But you know what? It's just as important to me. And I think we really need to look at that before we go through and you do this stuff. Let's have real decent public hearing. Have some in Hobbs, have some here, have some in Albuquerque, you know, have some in Midland. Let's have some real decent public hearings and do a good job of what we're doing and be honest with the people. And just remember that, because I tell you, transuranic waste is not what's in that place in WIP now. And that's exactly what the people were told. No, don't clap. Please don't do that. That's not fair in a public meeting. But you know, I spent 38 years doing this stuff about listening to people, and you need to listen as well as we learn in the legislature in New Mexico. And you know, I think this is something that we need to really look at and study very deeply, and have more than just 6 or 7 little posters on the wall in there and tell people that's what this is about. And so I really hope you open this up and do it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy. And now we're going to hear from Thomas.
Amen.
Thomas Kennedy.
Before my time starts, I'd like a point of order for this meeting. This meeting should be conducted under Robert's Rules of Order. And there should be no clapping, cheering, standing up, and all that stuff, and the snide comments in the back. So that's with due respect for the way governments are run. And first of all, thank you for coming and listening to us. I too was with the WIP hearings. I went through all those hearings. We were promised there would never be high-level waste here. And I can tell you, President Bush, Senator Domenici, Senator Bingaman, Representative Justine, DO Secretary John O'Leary, officials from Carlsbad, Hobbs, Eddy and Lee counties, all promised that there would never be high-level waste here. We've been lied to. We've been deceived. We've been misled. We need to stop that. You need to stop that. We don't want that anymore. We're done with that. You know, our roads are bad. You know, they fixed our road. Roswell has a 2-lane bypass. It's the only WIP route road in the country with 2 lanes. And it has at-grade crossings, which are dangerous as hell. I've had friends almost killed with those crossings. That's not safe. We need to make it safe. This Holtec deal, how much money comes out of there for roads, for infrastructure, for training, for our emergency preparedness? Not a damn dime. Nothing. We got that with WIP. We don't get anything with Holtec. And, you know, I'm in the oil business. And I'm drilling more wells this year than I ever have in my whole life. And the Permian Basin is the hottest oil play in the world. There's major oil companies spending literally multi-billions of dollars in this field. And to put this, whatever it is in the ointment,
Fly.
fly in the ointment, I was gonna say turd, but I was fly in the ointment, is wrong. You know, what happens if there's an accident? What happens to our budget of our state? Most of the money comes from the oil extractive industries, including oil. What happens to the state permanent fund? If there's a reaction or there's an incident or accident, that funding will go away. We're gonna have to shut down the oil business. And, you know, all my life savings is in the oil field. And I'll probably be broke. And I don't think that's fair to me. I don't think that we should have this stuff slammed down our throat. And it might be good for Carlsbad and Hobbs 15 years ago, but today with the oil business, the way the technology is, it's all technology driven. Horizontal wells, 3 miles long, think how long that is, underground lateral, and costing millions, multi-millions of dollars. Technology, this is all technology driven. We don't have the technology to develop to store this stuff in southeast New Mexico.
And Thomas, can I get you to sum up for us?
Okay. And you know, there's a lot of other businesses that are related. We have a lot of agriculture. If you look at the Pecos River Valley, all the dairies, all that stuff comes in on railroads, and all that sand comes in on for fracking, all the feed for dairies. You know, it would be devastating to our industry in this area. I know we need jobs, but we don't need bad jobs. This is like 55 jobs. Thanks for listening, and I would ask you to refrain from clapping and cheering and all that stuff, because it's inappropriate.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Is Sean McDaniels, Rhonda Suderman King, Karen Haddon. I know Karen's here. Oh, wait a minute, let's see if is this? No, it's not Rhonda. Go ahead, Karen. Never gonna go to Mary Beth? No? Okay. Noel Marquez, Patricia Cardona, and Lon Burnham. Okay. And this is Karen Haddon.
Good evening, my name is Karen Haddon. I'm the director of a nonprofit organization called Seed Coalition Sustainable Energy and Economic Development Coalition. There are so many reasons why I think this project should be withdrawn. This and WCS. Many speakers have made those comments. This is not the right place for high-level radioactive waste. There's no justice. It doesn't make sense, and it is not safe. In one of your first slides, excuse me, you mentioned that you're here to ensure that it's safe. We're here, I think you can get the message from the people in this room tonight. It is not safe. Let's be clear about that. And I've read through the documents, and I've never seen an application like this that is so full of holes. It's half done. It's sort of like the karst topography, which is Swiss cheese. It's like the same thing. There is so much information missing. And I've looked back. This land is the exact same site for the GNET project that was proposed years ago. For decades, there are some people in this area who have been trying to bring in deadly poison. And I don't know why. It's got to be green. There's no other good explanation. And when you compare that previous application and you look at the environmental analysis, you will find that it is much more complete than what is passing for an environmental report today. So in your review, I urge you to go back to that original document and study it and add in what has been left out. I also encourage you to look at climate change, which to my best of my knowledge is not being considered, and to look at the new SMU report. There are so many factors that need to be considered in this analysis. Furthermore, when you come to alternatives, let's really consider some, not just whether to do this site or not. Let's consider what alternatives that land could be used for, whatever it may be, because there are many. And there are many ways to build the economy and to build this community. And everybody wants that. But why risk everything existing for a few jobs and for money for some people?
I think the application should make clear some things that are not clear. How much money? Who gets it? How does it get distributed? And I found myself trying to find an analogy for this. It was very late at night, and I was like, this is all about paying people to do what no one else will do. Nobody on the East Coast wants it. Nobody on the West Coast wants this stuff. So it's like, let's find a community that we can bribe. How much money is it going to take? What will it take? And so I started thinking about the fact that, okay, I like rattlesnakes. I'm fine with them, but I kind of like them where they are. They have their role, their place in nature. I have no desire to have a loose rattlesnake in my bedroom. And you could not pay me to any amount of money to have a rattlesnake in my bedroom loose for 24 hours. That would be a deadly poison. And then you could not even pay me more to do it for a year or 100 or 120 years, nor could you give me any money that would say, okay, we're going to keep adding snakes. So there's 10,000 of them in your room over 20 years. And you know, I can see some fancy math because I look at the license application and I see these fancy formulas that reduce it down to no risk because it's never happened before. Well, I'll bet every single one of 10,000 snakes never bit anybody before. But I'll bet if you put them all in my room, I'd be sitting. And you know, who knows if I'd survive. I know that this is a very strange analysis, but you know, I think this high-level radioactive waste is 1,000 times more risky than the rattlesnake that never bit anybody. And I don't buy this mathematical magic where we say it's never happened before, so it's not going to. NRC's own studies done for Yucca Mountain show that accidents are going to happen. Question is how fast. The testing, we see posters of the testing. That testing has mostly been computer modeling. It is not full-scale testing. A lot of times it can be small-scale testing in a few instances, and they don't tell you the full picture. They don't tell you what happened after the test period. They don't tell you all the details. We have already had train crashes head-on, 65 miles per hour in West Texas.
Could you sum up?
I will. That exceeds all of the testing that's been done. Furthermore, I think that this license application needs to clarify because it says conflicting things on many points. One of them, who would have title to the waste, whether it's DOE or private hands. That has got to be made clear because depending on that is whether this is legal to move forward at all. Secondly, there are two different numbers for the tons of waste and there is no total number of waste. So if you do 8680 tons for 500 canisters times 20, you come out with 173,000 tons of waste, whereas we're told this is going to be capped at 100,000. This needs to be clarified. I will wrap up in just a moment. Furthermore, there needs to be a legal description of the property because how can we, as members of the public, truly analyze the site and get down into the exact environmental issues when the defining boundaries are not given? I cannot understand why that is not in there. The heavy train cars need to be looked at and the crumbling infrastructure of the rail lines. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Noel. Okay.
Marquez.
Okay.
Marquez.
Okay, hi, Noel.
Hello, my name is Noel Marquez. I'm from a rural area of Artesia, New Mexico. The town of Artesia is one of many rural communities in New Mexico being left out of these NRC hearings. I am the face of Ground Zero and the father of this 11-year-old daughter here that always asks, why is it that old people always make rules and choices without considering us and future generations? The NRC and Holtec International are intentionally drowning the voices of thousands, if not millions, of New Mexico people by limiting our participation in the destination outcome of this extremely hazardous and toxic waste proposal. You rush to make this Holtec dump a nightmare for us who live along the railroad tracks that only have one home, and we plant our own gardens. We're outraged that you would disregard our families and children and unborn generations. Your nuclear regulated industries have little consideration for our livelihoods and our native peoples of the state of New Mexico. Nuclear power plants want to pass on the worst waste product, spent uranium fuel rods, where it is now currently in a safer mode of storage, to a centralized temporary storage facility. Who can blame them? It's killer stuff. And for the most part, 80% of our communities in New Mexico do not know what the NRC and Holtec are planning. An issue as critically important as this one, there should be an available environment impact study available in English, Spanish, and Navajo, with plenty of time to inform the public through newspaper, radio, television, billboards, and other public spaces in order for us to make an informed decision. 30 state representatives wrote a letter to you, the NRC, to slow the process down for the same purpose, and you denied the request. The reality is we don't live in a people-first democracy, but rather a money-power-first reality, and the NRC is their tool. The science and technology of your experiments are always flawed, as we have seen it with Los Alamos, where the nuclear industries are always desecrating more of our lands, air, and water. Billions of taxpayer dollars are being spent at risk to repair the damages. The state of New Mexico is already overburdened with 10 official radioactive dumps, and now you want to crown us with this worst possible dump ever. Our current and future generations would have to suffer the stigma and health consequences for hundreds, if not thousands of years for being crowned the official nuclear dump of America. Many possible better job industries will reconsider before coming to our hazardous radioactive waste first state. The plain simple truth is the ionizing radiation hazards will not be contained to the Holtec site. My daughter always says, what makes you think you can control the molecules? It will contaminate many more lands through the transportation routes, railway accidents from the eastern and western United States, accidents, acts of terrorism, weather-related causes, and sinkhole geology from the nearby extractive industries. There is also a major concern of contamination at the site with casks that are made for temporary storage, but will probably never make it out of New Mexico. Holtec's guinea pig experiment is to stack these casks on top of each other, which has never been done before.
And Noel, can I get you to sum up for us, please?
Well, the state of New Mexico deserves better than this low-quality science scheme, and we will never consent to poisoning our current and future generations. Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Patricia Cordone.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Everybody said it.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. How
That's
about
what I-
Lon Burton?
Oh, he's got
There he
plenty to
is.
say.
So, good evening. My name is Lon Burnham, and I live in Fort Worth, Texas, but I was born in Artesia. My mother went to public school there. My grandparents were buried there, and I've come to this part of the world every year of my life. 65 up now. I was also in the Texas legislature for 18 years and known as like the environmental activist in the Texas legislature. And one of the things in the environmental, I always call it the DREG committee because that's the nature of Texas politics. In theory, it's about protecting people's health. And there's a permitting process, and I always remind people that the permitting process is permission from the government to pollute your air and water. And so the question is, we now have an application to pollute the air and water. It is inherently a polluting activity. And the question is, just how dangerous is this? And what are the probabilities? What kind of risk management are we looking at? In the Environmental Reg Committee of the Texas House of Representatives, we talked about cumulative impacts of air pollution permits. If you were to do a proper environmental impact statement, you will take into consideration the cumulative impacts on the communities of New Mexico, starting with the mining process, where the Dene have been so polluted that they die disproportionately of cancer for any population in the country. You will think about the cumulative impacts on the plutonium that's already in the Rio Grande River, which is water supply for people from Santa Fe downstream from there. You think about the cumulative impacts of the 3-year hiatus of the WIP site. What if that had been worse? What if that had been an accident above ground? What kind of economic impacts are we talking about? See, I think the system is fundamentally flawed because the NRC does not exist to support public health and welfare in the environment. The NRC exists to serve as a Chamber of Commerce agency of a fundamentally flawed and I think immoral industry. I think it is immoral to split the atom and create plutonium. So I agree with the earlier speakers, the faith community. We are committing a sin against creation, and it is the cumulative impact. As the NRC has, as Kevin tried to point out, and his question was parsed and nuanced, they've never denied a permit to pollute our air, water, and soil. They have never shown restraint that needs to be shown. So I'm going to ask each of you, as a person of conscience, as Bishop Matthiessen said to the Pantex workers, resign your post. You work for a fundamentally flawed agency that is not about protecting the health and welfare. It is about corporate greed and corporate money. It is time to put an end to this. A true environmental impact statement will look at the concerns that I talked to Jose about. You know, I live within a mile of Tower 55. The transportation system in this country is fundamentally flawed. The railroad system is not owned by the national government. They don't have to take the product. And they can't. A lot of those bridges, you know, are over 100 years old. My grandfather worked on the Santa Fe Railroad. They're fundamentally flawed. The process here is fundamentally flawed because you are serving the industry that you're supposed to be protecting us from. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Lon.
Rose, would you come up and talk to us? And then we're going to go to Bobby Rydell, Robin Gale Seidel, John Buxer, and Linda Squire, and Alan Squire. Rose.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rose Gardner. I'm from Eunice, New Mexico. I'm also a founder of the Alliance for Environmental Strategies. I'm here to tell Holtec, hell no, we don't want it. I am so sick and tired of all these big companies coming into New Mexico or close to my town in Eunice wanting to give us all this crap that could kill us. And you know what? These folks are sitting up in their little mansions, New York, Minnesota, San Antonio. Heck, I don't know where you live, and I really don't care. But I am concerned about the transportation issue of this cargo, 10,000 cargo cars. They're already too heavy. They're too heavy for the cars, they're too heavy for the railways. I'm also concerned about the impacts that it's going to have on the oil and gas and potash industries. Also, how is the health and welfare going to be considered in this area? We're already poor. We don't have insurance. You gotta have a good job to get good insurance. I'm also concerned that these canisters are inferior. Do you realize there are canisters out there this thick? And we're selling for something that's this thick? That's stupid. I'm also concerned that the waste will never be moved. We already know that 120 years would be way longer than any of us in this room. My little pie there'll be pet crabs 5 times. This isn't the right thing to do. It's an injustice to this state, to this community, to these people. Most of the people in this area are like me, brown-skinned or darker. We speak another language. And we're at least 50% here. And that's an environmental injustice because they're basically saying it's okay to dump because those people aren't going to speak up. Because they can get run over just like they've been run over for the last several hundred years.
That's right.
What I do think ought to happen is that those big containers that I'm talking about ought to be implemented at all nuclear facilities now. They should be protected from that nasty waste that's been created. They've had to live with it for this long. They're going to have to live with it a little longer. Let's make it safe for them until a permanent repository is found. Let's make sure that they're going to be okay, that their babies are okay, and that their babies are okay. One thing I wanted to mention is that I think it's already been mentioned that there were about 30 political leaders in our state that signed on to a letter to the NRC that asked for more time. I have copies of the letter in the other room if you want to review it. And you can see some of those people that signed that letter. And then we got 7 other, apparently more qualified, more intelligent, maybe they are on the tape, I don't know. But Senator Carol Lavelle, Senator Gay Kernan, Senator Ron Griggs, Representative Catherine Brown, Representative Jim Townsend, Representative Larry Scott, and Representative David Gallego. How dare you? How dare you withhold evidence, material that they need to know to make fair decisions about me and my family? How dare they? They are wrong, and they should be called out on it. And you know what? They got voted into office. Let's boot them out. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, brother. I promised one of the public that I would put one thing out that he wanted to say. This is Bob Press. I don't know if any of you know him, but his ride was leaving. So he just wanted me to offer one comment for him. And as a facilitator, I'll do that. He said that this should be put before, it should be put on the ballot in New Mexico about whether this facility should be here or not. So I offer that for him. And is Bobby Rydell? This is Bobby. Hi, Bobby. And then we're going to go to Rob and Gail Seidel and John Butcher and the Squires. Go
Hola,
ahead.
buenas noches y muchas gracias por la invitación. Muchas gracias a las personas de Holtec, a las personas de NRC y también a las personas que residen aquí en el área de Nuevo México y a los visitantes de Texas. Muchas gracias. I can do this in both English and Spanish, but I don't know how many people speak Spanish here in this room, but I'm here representing Hispanic women in science. My name is not Bobby, my name is Jenna Strong, but she gave me the place to speak to you tonight. So I just want to say that I'm a woman, I'm Hispanic, and I'm coming from a very conservative Catholic family. And, I grew in a place where I was raised to be intuitive and to always, make questions about how to make this world a better place. So, and one of the other things that is also very important to mention is that I'm coming from this new generation. So I'm here to give voice to this new generation. And the reason why I'm here is because I decided to choose a career that is gonna change people's lives in a positive way and that is nuclear engineering, because I do believe that nuclear engineers will be able to provide a better future for everybody. So I think that this, consolidated interim storage is gonna work. So I know that many people don't agree to that, but I mean, we need to use facts. And I don't know if you guys have already checked, the reports, the environmental reports. So all the information is there. Another thing that I would like to mention is that thousands of people in this world, they benefit from nuclear industry. Thousands of people. So that's also something that we need to be aware of. So one of the things that I've been seeing while being in this industry is that I can smell the fear of the oil industry. I can smell it in this room, unfortunately. So we know, actually, we already transferred spent fuel, and we haven't had a single accident. So I'm here as a woman, as a Hispanic, as a millennial, to bring innovative ideas in the nuclear industry realm. And also I have a moral obligation to defend our future. And I believe that ignorance is a very dangerous weapon. So I'm here to defend this future with knowledge and facts. So all the technical details about security and environmental aspects, they have been realized, they have been checked already. But we're still dealing with ignorance. And that's why I'm here, because I believe that the nuclear industry is gonna regenerate the world in a positive way. And I know, even though you guys want it or not, we are getting benefits from nuclear industry already. So that's all that I'm gonna say tonight, because we already have all the rectors and everything out there. And I will invite you, everybody, to read and to learn a little bit more. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Robin Seidel.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience. Really appreciate you all being here. It was good to talk to some of you earlier. Really appreciated that.
Robin, talking to that mic.
This mic?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm at the right mic now. So I live 2 miles from the railroad tracks, and the transportation issue is very concerning to me. And just because there hasn't been an accident doesn't mean that there wouldn't be an accident. And really, statistically speaking, when there hasn't been an accident yet, you have a greater possibility or probability of having that accident soon. I also ran a small food company for almost 35 years, and we built 6 retail stores. We employed 300 people, and we worked with over 300 farmers around the state. So any kind of accident could cause for us what people are calling radioactive stigma, which is that all of those farmers, that $40 million business, which is really a drop in the bucket when you think that just the dairy industry alone is worth about $5 billion annually in New Mexico. Our 40 million looks really tiny, but it's the livelihood of 600 people. And to trade that for a mere 55 jobs just doesn't make sense. And it seems that it's really not a very well thought out project. So I want to, one of the things that your poster said is that you're taking into consideration socioeconomic issues. And so that to me is really important, that you could bring, for 55 jobs, right, you could take away 23,000 jobs in the dairy industry and our measly little 600 jobs, 300 farmers and their livelihood, and 300 retail grocery store workers. So I would ask you also, if you've never denied a project before, maybe now's the time to change that record, that you take a good look at what's happening. People here have so much more technological knowledge than I have, and so I would say to you, many people have spoken much more eloquently than I could, but it's really time to deny a project. And I also would say that you need to, and I'll wrap up in a second, that you would need to include in your financial strategies and information the alternatives of what happens if the dairy industry goes down, and how are you going to indemnify people? How are you going to reimburse all of those people whose livelihoods one little accident, one little leak has taken away? And so that's really important, and that needs to be in your environmental impact statement. How much, where are you going to find the money? Who's going to cover that insurance cost? How are you going to make all of us whole who might experience an accident, who live along the railroad lines, who farm, who do all of that? So I would ask that. And Rose, you were so eloquent and so beautiful, and so many people here have such deep spiritual and social and cultural concerns. And all of that needs to be written really clearly in your environmental impact statement. And I really look forward to seeing you again at the EAS draft hearings. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. John.
It is
Is it
cold
cold?
in here.
Yeah.
Cold.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is John Bookser. I live in Santa Fe. I've lived in New Mexico most of my life, and I've come to love New Mexico, and I've even come to love Texans. They bring a lot of money to our state, and by golly, they're pretty nice people. I think that Holtec is actually providing a needed solution. However, they are proposing to use it in an extremely inappropriate manner. Currently, nuclear reactors produce electricity. I use a lot of it. But I think we have other alternatives at this point in time. When a reactor fuel rods are used up, they are placed into fuel pools, and that's actually the most vulnerable part of the fuel process after the used fuel. Then it's placed into a cask and left, at present it's mostly left on site. It may actually be that leaving the waste for a longer period of time at ground level is good because it generates a lot of thermal heat, and if you stick it in a long-term facility, it may not work out so well because of the amount of heat generated that's not dissipated. We should be looking at a process that considers potentially a waste site in every single state, because this problem is not just New Mexico's, it's everybody's problem. Until a permanent solution is determined, the waste should not move unless it's a high-risk location. San Onofre is a good example. It's both at risk due to tsunami, due to corrosion from salt water, and from being very close to a fault line. Potential destinations for this waste that's particularly high risk could be military bases or nearby reactor sites. They're already guarded. The Holtec site is not a controlled airspace. The public along routes needs to be engaged on a regular basis, not grandfathered in because of a past NRC decision. We should stop creating this waste. We should not reprocess it and perpetuate the problem. We have a super nuclear reaction a few million miles away. The waste is handled. Our atmosphere deals with what waste products come our way. Let's use that. Let's not turn southeast New Mexico and west Texas into a waste site. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Is Linda Squire or Alan Squire? Linda, come on up, please. Talk to us.
My name is Linda Squire, and
Microphone.
my name is Linda Squire, and my husband and I are here to speak tonight because of our experiences owning and running a dairy in Hagerman, New Mexico. My husband and I are both veterinarians. We both graduated from Ohio State University in 1975, and I was one of the first women to be allowed into vet school in great numbers. And I remember well being a woman in a man's profession. And I will say to some of the younger people here that I believe that I thought I knew more when I graduated than after I had worked for an older veterinarian who was about 65 years old, worked for him for a couple of years. So there is a learning curve to all professions. One book that I found helpful recently is a book called Nuclear Wasteland. And it gives a history of the nuclear industry and all things nuclear. So that's a really good reference book. For the past 25 years, our family has had this farm, and I believe that a serious incident at a nuclear storage facility in really close proximity to the dairy farms could have a really serious negative impact on the local economy. I also see this facility as a potential health threat to myself and my herd. Animals can serve as sentinels to warn us of impending human health issues. Animals all around us are telling us about the effects of exposure to radioactive materials. These materials can enter the bodies of the animals through the respiratory tract or through inhalation of airborne particles, followed by deposition in lung tissue or absorption into the bloodstream. Entry into the gastrointestinal system is also possible if the animal drinks contaminated water or eats plants that have been contaminated with radioactive elements. And radionuclide absorption can also occur across the skin, direct skin contact. Most of the uranium, thorium, and radium taken in orally will be eliminated by the kidneys and via the intestinal tract. But the fact that these elements are of the heavy metal category means that a certain amount of each of these will end up being deposited in bone, where they will be sequestered for a very long time. In the early 1990s, New Mexico Environment Improvement Division found high radionuclide levels in cattle that were raised in proximity to abandoned uranium mines and minerals. Levels of uranium in the kidneys of these cattle were found to be over 8 times the levels of the control animals. Concentrations of radium-226 in the femur bones of exposed cattle were almost 50 times the level of the control animals. And this is from the New Mexico Environment Improvement Division. Rabbits captured near tailings piles near grants were found to have radium concentration in muscle that was about 4 to 40 times the background levels. Strontium-90 can enter the food chain when it falls from the air as fallout onto grasses or forages that are then eaten by a cow. Later it can appear in the cow's milk. Eventually it may deposit in the bones of a milk drinker. Strontium-90 from fallout has also been detected in deer bone, antlers, and teeth. Isotopes of iodine can also be taken in with forages, and they can appear in milk, and they can potentially cause thyroid cancers in the consumer. Cesium-137 is another one that can appear in meat and milk. After the Chernobyl incident, there were reports of wild boar who would eat mushrooms, which bioaccumulate radionuclides. And these wild boar, which are considered a delicacy in that area, were declared unfit for human consumption because of the radionuclide contamination. So after many years, contaminated regions are still dangerous potentially because wildfires can release the stored radioactive elements that the plants have absorbed. So during a smoke incident, animals and plants downwind of the burn can actually become contaminated by virtue of the smoke. 50 years after 2 plutonium fires that had occurred at the Rocky Flats facility north of Denver, they did some studies on deer carcasses, and they still found that 2 of the analyses for the various isotopes still exceeded the thresholds for, quote, acceptable risk range associated with ingestion of those tissues. The Hanford site in Washington, the Idaho National Laboratories, Fernald in Ohio, Oak Ridge in Tennessee, and Pantex in Texas, and the Savannah River site are all just a few of the glaring examples of what can go wrong when government fails to provide reasonable planning, oversight, and management of dangerous facilities, and then chooses to ignore and minimize the damage.
And Linda, can I ask you to sum up?
Sure. For the past 5 years, I've been doing an independent study of geographical areas that have been recognized as places where human or animal prion diseases have occurred. I've looked at clusters of chronic wasting disease in deer and animal. I've examined the sparse information out there about BSE and Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is the human form of BSE. I've identified 4 factors that seem to be present in almost every location that I study. Radionuclide contamination, the presence of various heavy metals, including manganese and lead in many of the sites. Fluorides is another thing that's in these sites. And aluminum, usually in the form of bentonite or more aluminum. So I am urging you to study these clusters of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease and BSE and chronic wasting disease. If you map up a map of Colorado where these diseases occur in deer and elk, and you superimpose abandoned mine tailings and uranium deposits and the fluoride sites where they have high fluoride minerals and the clays in those formations, you will find that they are almost the identical maps. And I hope that you'll study this because it really needs to be studied, if not by your agency, then by possibly the Department of Defense, who are doing active research on prions right now. They're funding prion research. They must know something that we don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I would just say that, you have an opportunity to also amplify on your comments by submitting written comments, and scientific information like that would be appreciated by the NRC. Now we're going to Alan Squire.
My name is Al Squire. It's kind of hard to follow my wife. She does a pretty good job. And I think most of the other speakers tonight have already covered most of the points I have to say, but I'm going to try to do a few of them again anyway, just to kind of refresh your memory. My wife and I moved here 25 years ago, and we started building a dairy, and we wound up currently to where we have 50-some employees. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the New Mexico dairy industry. We currently, and somebody else has already used my fire here, but I'm going to repeat it anyhow. We currently have a total economic impact in the state exceeding $5 billion a year. And that is second only, and I guess a pretty small second, to the gas and oil industry as far as contributions to the state and the state economy. We're still proud of our industry anyway. The dairy industry currently provides employment for nearly 6,000 people directly and over 17,000 people indirectly with the various businesses that we do business with. Part of that is the fact that we ship our milk to 2 of the largest cheese plants in the world, the Leprino plant in Roswell and Southwest Cheese in Clovis. So if you compare that to the number of jobs that Holtec is planning on having, I think, 50 or 60 jobs there, I think we have a fairly major contribution to the state. A large majority of our feeds that we do not raise come in on rail cars. And so they'll be using the same transportation routes that these fuel rods would be using. A lot of the feeds that we raise, we have to have irrigation, so we depend on clean water not only for our cows to drink, but also for raising the crops. Basically, everything we do has to be really, really clean. We depend on a really clean water supply with no contaminants in it to feed our dairies and our cows and calves. our dairy industry depends upon being able to deliver a very safe and wholesome, nutritious dairy product, milk. Any hint of radioactive contamination of any of our feed, any of our milk supply would cause an immediate loss of our markets for milk and beef. That actually happened after the 3 Mile Island accident in Pennsylvania. They told people, put your cows in the barns and just feed them stored feed. We don't know what's gonna happen. But we can't really do that out here. I guess one of the biggest concerns we have is, then what do we do? Okay, if we have a contamination, if we have something that was as substantial as what happened in Colorado or any of the other nuclear accidents, you know, these are the rods that caused things like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and Fukushima. So what happens if we've contaminated our feed and our cows and we can't sell the milk? What do we do? What do we do? We've got 4,000 cows. We can't sell the milk. We can't afford to keep them, and we can't sell the beef. Now, who in the hell is going to be responsible to indemnify the dairy producers for something that's happened like that? Who is responsible? I want to know who is responsible for the liability that is created by this situation. And those of us in the southern part of the state know this well. We feed the rest of the state, not only the dairy industry, the ranching industry, the gas and oil industry. The rest of the state lives off of us. So whatever happens down here, negative or positive, affects the rest of our state. And I guess I'm going to close with the age-old comment, don't poop where you eat.
Okay, Al.
I'll write it down.
We're gonna go to Melanie Deason, then we're gonna get Kevin Camps up here. And then, we're gonna go to, Rhonda Galo, James Pike, Dieter Hanabicki, and Gemma Strong. But this is Melanie, and next Kevin.
Thank you for hosting this. I know it was a good journey. Thank you for being here. My name is Melanie Deason. I've lived a decade in Roswell. Shortly before retiring, I spent 8 years as wetlands coordinator with the New Mexico Environment Department and wrote the state's EPA-funded wetlands conservation plan. I seriously question the science of Holtec's environmental assessment and section on water resources because Holtec violates 2 siting premises: isolated from populated areas, pay attention on this one, and away from water sources. The proposed site puts both at risk. Point 1, I disagree that there are no sensitive or unique aquatic or riparian habitats or wetlands at their site. Holtec uses a federal jurisdictional wetland definition and fails to mention the 1997 NMED included Playa Lakes as wetlands. Truth, Playa Lakes at Holtec site do meet criteria for New Mexico's wetlands. Only one of 3 defining wetland characteristics must be met: wet soils, wet living plants, or wet conditions. Point 2, I take exception to Holtec's misleading surface water statements that there is no external drainage within 2 playas on site, that losses are only by evaporation, including 4 off-site ephemeral playas, and that runoff does not drain to the river 26 miles to the west. Because they portray Playa Lakes as self-contained holding ponds like stock tanks that catch and contain but do not drain. Truth, playa hydrology is unique and external drainage does exist. By draining down to unseen water tables and aquifers below, and substantiated by Holtec's own report, my next point. Point 3, I commend Holtec's report for stating the site's near-surface water table appears to be 35 to 50 feet deep, likely controlled by water levels in Playa Lakes, highly saline from industry abuse. But Holtec ignores the obvious. They propose digging approximately 20 feet below grade, which is dangerously near their
admitted fluctuating water table. Past dumping of brine into Playas has reached the Pecos River in this region. Proof that should radiation escape Holtec storage, it could reach the aquifers, not just in New Mexico, but Texas and possibly the Oklahoma of 8 states. Truth, Holtec storage casks are designed for breathing air, not drowning, from groundwater below or rain above. Any breach, in or out, intensifies and releases radiation to water, ground, and air. Regional heaving and ground subsidence from fracking, common in New Mexico and nearby Texas, could flood Holtec's below ground storage and drop it into the water table below, poisoning the Trans-Pecos area. Point 4. From Holtec's report, April to September thunderstorms provide 60% of the annual flow in the Pecos Basin. But, has Holtec forgotten New Mexico's 1938 Pecos River Compact with Texas and the 2009 settlement for sharing the river's irrigation waters? Equally, as beneficial use of any unappropriated flood waters. Truth, the region's Playa Lakes hydrology ensures these important seasonal rains reach the Pecos River, and because Holtec's own report acknowledges impoundment of all surface water into Playas, we've now come full circle. Water does leave Holtec's site, impounded or not, due to Playa Basin's unique hydrology. Holtec's proposal violates the Pecos River Compact. Radiation cannot benefit the food chain. It causes irreversible harm to plants, animals, and humans. That is genocide. I, Melanie Deason, do not consent.
Thank you, Melanie. And next, we're gonna hear from Kevin Camps, and then we're gonna hear from Rhonda and James. Kevin.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, NRC, for hosting this town hall style public comment session. I have prepared several sets of comments on different subject matter, different aspects of the high risks of the Holtec proposal. And if they're of use to anyone in preparing their own comments, please feel free to use them in any way that's helpful. So tonight, I'll start with transportation risks. The risks of transporting highly radioactive irradiated nuclear fuel, whether by train, truck, or barge, on rails, roads, or waterways, is a high risk. The risks include the release of disastrous amounts of hazardous radioactivity, whether due to severe accidents or intentional attacks. Severe accidents could include high-speed crashes into immovable objects like bridge abutments, or high-temperature, long-duration fires, or long-duration underwater submersions. This is not a complete list. Intentional attacks, such as by anti-tank missiles or shaped charges, could also breach shipping containers and release their contents into the environment. For these reasons, critics have long called such shipments potential mobile Chernobyls, dirty bombs on wheels, and floating Fukushimas. As Holtec ELEA has claimed in its license application that any and all NRC certified canisters can be accommodated at this facility, not only rail-sized shipping containers must be worried about, but so too must legal weight truck casks, which would travel on interstate highways. Thus, whether by truck, train, or barge, on roads, rails, or waterways, the mobile Chernobyl risks of this scheme must be addressed. But another aspect of shipping risks is the risk of so-called routine or incident-free shipments, nonetheless being like mobile X-ray machines that can't be turned off. This phrase was coined by Lauren Olson more than 20 years ago. This is due to gamma and neutron radiation being emitted from the highly radioactive wastes aboard. To shield it all would require radiation shielding so thick that containers would be extraordinarily expensive to construct, but also so heavy as to be difficult or impossible to move. So NRC allows a certain amount of gamma and neutron radiation to be emitted. Granted, this radioactivity dissipates quickly with distance, but at 6 feet away from the container's exterior surface, a dose rate of 10 millirem per hour is allowed. That's about 1 to 2 chest X-rays worth per hour. At the exterior surface of the container, the allowable dose rate increases dramatically to 200 millirem per hour. That's 20 to 40 chest X-rays worth. Workers such as truck drivers, locomotive engineers, inspectors, security guards, etc., who come in very close physical proximity to the shipping container would be exposed to the highest radiation dose rates. But even innocent passersby and bystanders in the general public would also be exposed. This includes those who live close to transport routes, exposed to large numbers of shipments going by over time. Some people, such as pregnant women, should not be exposed to any radiation dose that can be avoided due to the high risk of harm caused to the fetus in the womb. Of course, shipments externally contaminated with radioactivity would emit even worse radiation dose rates. The state of Nevada, based on federal government data, has documented 49 incidents of accidental surface contamination on these highly radioactive waste shipments between the years of 1949 and 1996. And in France, Areva Corporation had many hundreds of externally contaminated shipments, a full 1/4 to 1/3 of all shipments bound for the Le Havre reprocessing facility. On average, these French contamination incidents emitted 500 times the allowable radiation dose rates. One even emitted 3,300 times the allowable dose rate. Allowable does not mean safe. Any exposure to ionizing radioactivity carries a health risk, and these risks accumulate over a lifetime. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Kevin. This is Rhonda. Okay. And if you could just introduce yourself to us.
Hi, my name is Rhonda. I'm a student at the University of New Mexico, and I'm studying nuclear engineering. I would like to start by saying that radiation is natural. We're all radioactive. We produce radioactivity naturally, but I understand the concern of high-level radioactive material, and that's okay. But the only way to overcome that fear is through true understanding and knowledge without bias. One of the main concerns is the transportation of the spent fuel. Transportation of spent fuel or radioactive material is not new, and it has already been done. WIP has driven trucks for 18 years with not a single transport accident. Urenco stores and ships tons of radioactive material by rail and truck without any incident. And I can be more than certain that this project wouldn't take off without first thoroughly testing and assuring safe transportation. In one of the posters outside today, we can see the different environmental and hypothetical accidents the canisters can endure. And some of these are heat, cold, pressure fluctuation, vibration, water spray, free drop, compression, penetration, 30 feet free fall, crash, immersion, puncture, and 800 degrees Celsius fire. And so I would highly doubt that, they would put people in danger and without testing these things. I would also like to mention that Holtec has already been transporting and spent nuclear fuel for decades here in the US and around the world. So it is not new, and it's not a mere luck that this has been done with excellence. It is not like we have tested and taken and are still taking the necessary precautions to get these materials to their destination safe. So there's the question of the rails and how they are going to withstand the weight. And yes, these things will get tested, and if they need repair, they will be repaired. And I understand our industry, the nuclear industry, is so fragile because we're constantly being watched by people. So we won't make mistakes. So I believe that the NRC, along with Holtec, will do everything in their power to make this project safe for our environment, our community, and our next generation. Thank you for listening.
Hey, thank you very much, Rhonda. This is James. Okay, and Gemma? Okay, James Pike.
Hello, everyone. My name is James Pike. I'm also a student at the University of New Mexico studying nuclear engineering. I'm a graduate student looking into material science, so a lot of
I know we're ending to make an IFA request now.
radiation and how to store stuff too. I just want to point out, I grew up in Los Lunas, New Mexico. I know what a small town culture feels like. I understand you guys' safeties and concerns. But I want to let you guys know that what the NRC is doing is they are trying to keep you guys safe. They are the guidelines for the world for any type of radioactive material handling or any type of nuclear power plants. I just went to a talk recently, and they talked about how countries around the world look to the NRC for safety and for help and for everything. They model what they look at after the NRC. And I know the NRC takes pride in that. So I don't think they will lie to you guys because they are setting a world example for you guys. One thing I'd also like to mention, and my colleague touched on it, radiation is everywhere. Who had a banana this morning? That had radiation in it. Also, one thing you guys might not know is radioactivity is used in the oil business. And you guys are not protesting that. They use radioactive tracers to put into the ground, and they track oil. They use radioactivity to find the formation of where oil is. So radioactivity, it is kind of scary, but we have knowledge of it, and we know how to keep it safe and keep it away from dairy farms and from places like that. And as future nuclear engineers, we want to ensure that safety. That's why we're down here too. We're listening to your guys' concerns, and in the future, we want to make sure your guys' concerns are in our design. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you, James. Thank you, James. And is it Gemma?
I let Gemma Strong take my place because I wanted a woman of color to speak before I did.
So, in other words, when I called Bobby Rydell,
Yeah, right.
right, you guys are changing identities. But do you want to talk?
Yes, I do.
Well, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Bobby Rydell. I'm sorry for any confusion. Today, I want to say I'm a nuclear engineer. I'm a graduate student, a PhD candidate at the University of New Mexico. And I want to say I ardently believe in this project. Nuclear spent fuel casks are designed in such a way that they are designed to be with the fuel, the dry fuel, is in a leak-proof container that is sealed. And that is within a larger container that is filled with an inert gas that allows for cooling of that spent fuel. I've heard a lot of really important concerns tonight about radiation leakage, about the fuel leaking out of these containers. And if you look at the actual designs of these spent fuel casks, you'll see that this isn't a problem. We are here today as experts in this field to talk to you about your concerns, to speak with you, and I'm so glad that I spoke to so many of you today. I would also like to say that the fear that people have around radiation, it is a concern. But if you actually look at the design of this place, if you are at the edge of this facility, let's say you're at the fence of this proposed Holtec facility, you will receive 25 millirems per year. If you stood at the edge of this Holtec facility for an entire year, now what is 25 millirems? Well, if you took a plane flight from New York to LA, it's about that much. So if you stood there an entire year, day and night, that's what you would get. How many of you like to take vacations? I would assume that many of you like to take vacations. Many of you have flown in planes. Many of you have gone to the dentist. Many of you, I see we have an older population. Maybe many of you have suffered from cancer. Did you know that all of the diagnostics for cancer treatment, that's radioactive material? The nuclear industry, if you actually look at CANDU reactors up in Canada, they produce all of the medical isotopes for the US. Things that you use every day, things that help you survive, are radioactive. And so what I'm here saying is that you don't need to fear this. You don't need to fear, like, oh my gosh, there's going to be some radiation that leaks. What are you, like, Okay, if you ate a banana this morning, you also got potassium-44 in your system as well. That's a radioactive isotope. I'm also here, I heard that you people have said, nuclear power hasn't done anything for me. The Palo Verde reactor in Arizona supports 35% of the carbon neutral energy for New Mexico. 20% of all power in the US is from nuclear power plants, and all of that, zero carbon emissions. If we get rid of our power plants, if we decide, we don't want to find a place to store this nuclear waste, it would be like getting rid of every single windmill in the US. You would be destroying the environment. I am here because I believe in supporting the environment and mitigating climate change. I am here because I believe that this is a safe facility, and I believe that we as a community with knowledge and understanding and talking to these people and reading the reports and learning about, okay, what is ELEA? What is a millirem? How many of you know what a millirem is? Learning those things are so important. Thank you. I want today answer your questions. We'll be here. You have questions for me? You have concerns? You're a skeptic? Please ask me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobby. And Peter? This is Dieter, and then we're going to go to Karen Bonin, Ira Strong, Charlene Hernandez, and Jimmy Garcia. Dieter.
Hello, I'm Dieter Hanbicki. I'm a current junior at the University of New Mexico, where I study nuclear engineering. Before I get into my speech that I prepared, one of my classmates wanted to show this. It is a letter of recommendation that we go along with the Holtec plan. We have 31 signatures on this petition along with it, including the one of the distinguished faculty members at UNM, Dr. Robert Bush, and the incoming American Nuclear Society president. So 3 years ago, I decided to move from my sleepy little town in southeastern Pennsylvania to New Mexico for my degree. I had never visited the state before, and my first thought when getting off this plane was, wow, it's hot. Later, I would go to see this state and see everywhere and see how beautiful it is. I started my New Mexico journey because I saw online that the Bureau of Labor Statistics website say that nuclear engineers make a starting salary of $80,000 a year, and I came to UNM because they accepted me. Holtec states that they will have about 100 operators, 100 construction jobs, and perhaps 50 manufacturing jobs if they get to stage 3, just in this area. That may not seem like a lot, but that would be 250 well-paying, secure jobs for a minimum of up to 40 years. The little town in Pennsylvania that I hail from has a population of only 3,000 people, with a median income of $56,000 per household. So while it doesn't seem like a lot, to me, that seems like a lot of jobs and a lot of money. In addition, my little town of New Britain, Pennsylvania, recently vetoed, we had a town hall meeting like this, where a gas plant wanted to be built in the town, and we vetoed it. So I know as long as I sympathize with you guys of not knowing something that we don't want in our town because we think it might be dangerous. Additionally, I agree with all of you. We should have a permanent waste solution site here in the United States. However, we don't. So this is the next best thing that we can have. New Mexico was here in the beginning of the nuclear industry, and it should continue to be there in the future of the industry. Even if it's for selfish reasons, I want the Holtec plant to be here so that I may be able to live here for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And Karen, are you going to come up and talk to us? Okay.
then we're going to Ira Strong, if I was still here, and then to Charlene.
According to these okay, according to this guideline for commenting on the scope of the EIS, some examples of information NRC is requesting are, I'm going to skip to the second one. What reasonable alternatives to the proposed action should be analyzed and why? I think the reasonable alternative that should be examined is, sure, if these casks are so safe, great, let's distribute them to the places where the nuclear power plants are. And I think this would be safer because you wouldn't, having a centralized target for terrorism is a dumb idea. And I know that they're vulnerable just being in pools with a roof over them or whatever. I don't know enough about that, I'd like to know more. But if these dry casks are really so great, and I want to thank John McKiergan for explaining to me how they actually go about putting the fuel rods into these casks. It's done underwater. And then there's a drying out process where helium, an inert gas, replaces the water vapor that's left. And I like that. And I think it's a great idea. And I think they should stay right there. Where they live their whole active lives. Also, he did mention that a tiny bit of water vapor, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Would probably remain inside the cask, but only a tiny amount. But that radiation escaping the inner container, this stainless steel cask, which someone mentioned is only a half-inch thick, and in Europe they use ones that are much bigger. I wonder why NRC is considered the model if Europe has something better. But something's funny. Anyway, the little bit of radiation that can exist inside the larger gas could cause that water vapor to separate into hydrogen and oxygen, and hydrogen, of course, is explosive in the presence of oxygen. So that sounded to me like a concern. I hope that that can be controlled somehow. Maybe it's not enough, maybe I didn't understand you completely, but maybe it's not enough to cause harm. But I also learned from talking with you, John, about the fact that when the fuel rods are first transported to the nuclear power plants, they're not as hot as they are later, because as uranium breaks down, giving off this tremendous energy that's used to boil water, to drive turbines to make electricity, they break down into other radioactive elements. And so some of those have longer half-lives, or instead of alpha, maybe they've got beta or gamma radiation. So the things actually get hotter. And this is a concern to me. But what I'd like to move to is what local sources of information should the NRC consider. I think you've already heard eloquent testimony from the dairy industry, and I know you're going to hear about the pecans that we grow here, which are yummy. And then you've heard about the immense amount of oil that we're sitting on that could be at risk. What I'd like to look at in terms of local information, and I don't mean just local to southeast New Mexico, I'm talking about the state as a whole. We have paid our nuclear dues. Starting at the Trinity site, where the first bomb was test exploded. The people of the Tularosa Basin who lived, I forget, 16, 18 miles away, were never warned, were never acknowledged. They suffer still. Even the ones who've moved away from that poisoned community have children who develop cancers that are, thyroid cancers especially, that are associated with exposure to radiation.
Sharon, I'm going to ask you to sum up, please.
All right, I will. Other people have mentioned the Navajo miners, and it wasn't just Navajos, it was also Laguna Pueblo people. A woman named Dorothy Purley testified in the 90s at an event that was sponsored by CARD. Oh, and I forgot to say I'm a member of CARD and a retired teacher. She testified about how she was given no warning and no protection as she drove trucks full of mining of the uranium ore to the milling sites, and all the dust that she was inhaling and so forth. She was already dying of cancer at that time. It's environmental racism all over the state. The first nuclear victims to be compensated were white. They were the Utah Mormon downwinders. One of them was also at this dinner honoring atomic veterans. And she said, "We are the most patriotic people in the United States, Mormons. We could not believe our government did this to us." Then, finally, after a while, after a lot of legal work,
Karen, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, please.
but not the ones in New Mexico, and not the ones who worked in mines and mills after 1970. There's so many gaps. We have paid our dues, and we have not, some of us, the most vulnerable, not been compensated or acknowledged. That's it.
And Karen, just for the record, could you tell people what CARD stands for? I don't know if people know.
Yes, CARD and I've only been a member for a few short years, although I attended many of the hearings that they invited me to. It stands for Citizens for Alternatives to Radioactive Dumping. We don't want our state to be a dump.
Thank you. And that's a New Mexico group. Okay.
It formed when WID was first being discussed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Karen. All right. And is Ira Strong here? And how about Jimmy? J-I-M-I? Here comes Jimmy.
No, I'll let you pass.
And then we're going to go to Charlene. And hey, thank you everybody for your patience tonight, but I think we're in the home stretch, or at least at the far turn.
It's not a bribe, it's just a snack.
Well, it could have been beer. That would be good.
Wow, yeah, I don't grow beer. I'm the one that's gonna talk about the tunnels. A lot of my concern, my name is Jimmy Gadzia. My family and I came here in 1906, so we've been here a long time. Love New Mexico and really care about it. And I could talk about a lot of issues, but they've really been covered here tonight. Health is a concern for me. Water is a concern, been discussed. And the oil and gas industry, which has also been discussed.
Our family has 3 properties, oil and gas interests, that's within 10 miles of the site. So it is a deep concern that we depend on as our family. But tonight I'm going to focus on agriculture because my family is also pecan farmers. Just after oil and gas, agriculture, and I'm going to talk about agriculture in general, is the 2nd largest industry in New Mexico. This region, Chavez, Eddy, and Lake counties are the largest agricultural region in the state. We have over 145,000 irrigated acres just in the Pecos Valley Conservancy districts alone. Pecans specifically are New Mexico's #1 food crop. In 2016, which is our latest numbers because we've just finished harvesting 2017 crop, New Mexico producers produced 72 million pounds of pecans worth over $213 million in sales. Now, New Mexico is only 2nd in the nation in producing pecans, 2nd only to Georgia, but we lead in cash receipts due to our improved varieties and our superior quality. So New Mexico also has the highest concentration of pecan production in the nation. And this production is from Roswell South. Also west, but all south in the 7th part of the state. There's a lot of front-end costs to starting a pecan field. So it's really a multi-generational kind of crop. So because the trees last 100 years, and it takes about 7 to 10 years before you can get a first crop. So there is a lot of front-end investment. So we started our farm in 1965. It took us 5 years to get our trees in. So 7 to 10 years from then is when we first started seeing a little bit of crop. So we have invested a lot of time and money into our pecan tree. My concern has been mentioned before when talking about the dairy industry. Consumers are really looking for cleaner foods. They're looking for higher quality foods. They're looking they're buying organic foods. They want less contamination. People eat pecans because they taste great, but also they're very nutritious. High in vitamins, fiber, and protein. High in good cholesterol-lowering fats. Pecans are heart healthy. The American Heart Association suggests that it reduces the risk of heart disease. So that's kind of our market. And as consumers demand better, higher quality products, our agriculture is moving in that direction as well. So just the siting of this facility could seriously impact our product, as well as all agriculture in the state. And there's never been an accumulation of this magnitude before. And so I truly believe that once the association is made, I think it could be an insurmountable reputation to overcome. And could seriously devalue our product or eliminate it altogether. Any accident will just exacerbate that problem and really could gut the food industry in New Mexico. And I just want to, there's just an example of the E. coli contamination that's going on with romaine lettuce. It was discovered on one farm. And the message to consumers are deciding, I'm not eating any romaine. I don't care where it's grown. And that's the way it happens. That's right. Even the CDC is supporting that, even though they've already identified where it's happening. And you can clean E. coli up, but I don't know that you can ever clean up contamination from radioactivity. So I think at that point, it's all over for us here, and there's no coming back from it. That's my concern.
And could you sum up for us?
Really? I have 5 pages. So I want to restate that this isn't really our way. I mean, the gal said that we have 30% in New Mexico, but really, most of this has been produced in other areas. So I have a really hard time agreeing to house all this all this waste that was not produced here. So, let me get to my last page. And I think with so much that New Mexicans have to risk, I have to ask myself, what are the benefits to us New Mexicans?
Yeah.
And I can't come up with it. So, I mean, a few jobs maybe, but I think that's it. So all we're asking for is to keep our clean environment so we can continue to make our living. And that's really all I have to say. So I don't consent to bringing the material. I think it will impact my livelihood and my life. So thanks for being here and thanks for letting us
Thank you.
speak.
Thank you. We're going to go to Charlene Hernandez, and then we're going to go to Janet Greenwald, and then we're going to go to Akia. Akia.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Charlene Hernandez, and I was born in Capitan, New Mexico in 1945. No, actually, it was 1946. My mom was pregnant with me when the atomic bomb at Trinity site was exploded. Okay, so that said, I want to say that I agree with most of the speakers that spoke tonight, and I hope you listened well because this is my state where I was born, and we were already blasted once, and we're still suffering the effects from that atomic bomb blast. Now, if this is so safe, like these people have said here, why does it cost so much for cleanup? I have read that it costs not just hundreds, not just thousands, but billions of dollars to clean up after a said problem with these waste containers that we had at Carlsbad, okay? That was shut down for 2 years, and the cleanup, all that other stuff, and little brief places I read it in the paper over the last few years. I've been keeping track of what's happened there. But I also have been in contact with people like the downwinders who have families who have lost entire families because of Trinity site. Now I've been telling people about the RECA Act. When I looked in the computer, the RECA Act is Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. It was passed in Colorado, Utah, parts of Arizona, but not New Mexico. Well, I've been keeping track with Senator Udall, who says that they're trying to expand the law to cover New Mexico, and that means they will compensate people who have relatives who have certain cancers, and they will pay people up to $50,000 for each loss for certain cancers. They will also pay your medical costs. If you're found to have those certain cancers, they'll pay your medical bills until you die. Now, not too many people know about that. I'm making that discovery, and it's a sad thing. Why are New Mexico people always the last to know? And why did they pick New Mexico? They picked New Mexico to test the atomic bomb, and they didn't ask anybody. I mean, scientists that didn't know what was going to happen did it. Because now, Lincoln County used to be where they had the very best apples. You go over there now, you can't find a single good apple bigger than that. We had big, huge apples, wonderful apples, different kinds of apples, not just one few little kinds. You know, we had several different kinds of apples. Now nothing grows that's bigger than that. A lot of contamination has happened. I agree very much with the scientist who spoke earlier, Mr. Steve Schafferman? Okay, he was from Texas. I totally agree with him 200%. The stability of this place is not good. I was in my house one day when my house shook, like in California when I was out there. I said, what's up with that? My house shook. The ground is not stable here. And that man was absolutely correct. Now, did you hear about the new caves that they found in Fort Stanton? The longest cave in the nation. Vertically like this, or horizontal, whatever, but it's the longest one, more than 30 miles. The end of that cave is at the bottom of the Roswell Airport. It ends there. It's a beautiful cave. And then my cousins said to me, or my cousins live there, they said, Charlene, that cave connects up to the Lincoln, more other caves that are there, and probably the Carlsbad Cave. So I think that you pay attention to that, gentleman. I think he had it all exactly correct, and that's all I have to say. Thank you very much. And thank you for being here and for looking into this situation. I hope you can come to a good conclusion that this is not a safe state. My suggestion is to let the people who have the those things where the radioactive waste is made, the nuclear reactor people who have those, they could keep it in their own place where they have their reactors. Now, send it somewhere else.
Thank you, Charlene.
You're welcome.
And we're going to go to Janet Greenwald, and then we're going to have IKEA or Queso come up, and then Susie Bell, Goss Lee, Soya Stevens, Alfredo Dominguez, and Stephen Picha, I think. And this is Janet.
Hi, I'm Janet Greenwald. I'm a coordinator of Citizens for Alternatives to Radioactive Dumping. And that was an organization formed 39 years ago by people in this part of the state. I'd like to report to you from a community that's close to a nuclear facility. It's the community where I raised my children. A beautiful little place in the Embudo Valley, which some people consider the organic breadbasket of New Mexico. It's in northern New Mexico. This community is bedroom community for Los Alamos, and it's also directly downwind from Los Alamos. Over a decade ago, there was a fire there, the Cerro Gordo fire, and after that, the New Mexico Environment Department visited the valley, and they said, there's cobalt in your plums, and there's cesium in your block clay, but don't worry about it, it's below regulatory concern. And then several months later, my daughter-in-law became pregnant, and a few months later, she lost one of her twins. And that was the first time in our memory, but we have twins on both sides of the family, the first time anyone lost a twin. And then they found out that the remaining twin's fallopian tube was malformed. So then she had a double-risk pregnancy. So in order to have her baby in the Espanola Hospital, my son and she had to look through this book of the deformed babies from Espanola Hospital. We're talking about badly deformed babies. No arms, etc. And they had to look through this book because they had to decide if their baby was born deformed, would they want to hold it after it was born, or did they just want someone to take it away? So we were very lucky because Olivia was born whole. But Espanola is also downwind and a bedroom community for Los Alamos. Not long after that, we found out that one of the mountain lakes that feeds the river that goes through the Embudo Valley had so much cesium around its shore that it was close to being a Superfund site. This is the headwaters of the Embudo River and also the Rio Grande. Then the other day, Olivia and her brother Ezra and I went to the to the library in this little community, and on the door there was a sign, and it said, "Support Group for Contaminated Los Alamos Workers, 9 a.m. on Saturday morning." So what do you think? Are nuclear facilities a benefit to the communities around them? Perhaps you've had a different experience than I've had. You can judge from what I've said. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Ikea, could I ask you to come up? And this is Ikea. Okay, and I can hold this for you, or do you want to hold it? Okay, Ikea.
My name is Taipei Marcus, and I am 11 years old. I'm here on behalf of unborn kids and born kids like me. I think this whole situation is very important because it affects everything and everybody. It affects the plants and wildlife around. I have recently been writing an essay about ecosystems and how it can be changed and affected and damaged and hooked up again, and but I read that ecosystems can be very easily poisoned through water, air, and soil. Water is, if all this radiation leaks into the water, everything needs water. Everything that's living needs water. It's going to suck up all of that, and it's going to get poisoned. My house, it has a pump. We pump underground water to our house, and we use it for everyday necessities. What if that gets poisoned? That we will get poisoned in all of our produce, our garden. My dad planted a bunch of trees. Is that going to get poisoned too? We also are pecan farmers too, and we get a living off that too. And we use it for our food. We also grow chili, tomatoes, and a lot of other stuff. Is that going to be affected too? Who is going to be, who's going to give us back all that produce that we just probably lost? Who's going to be, who's going to pay for it? Who's going to, reimburse us for it? I've been reading this book on climate change. It says radioactivity does contribute to climate change. It doesn't really produce that much carbon dioxide, but at the same time, it still does affect. And if you've seen a microwave, that's radiation. Imagine a microwave in the world. The whole world is a microwave. Microwaves make heat. That's going to be contributing to climate change. It's going to be contributing to a whole lot of problems. You may think you might be solving a problem, but really you're just creating more problems to solve. And they might just be forever. You might just not be able to solve them. So, please do remember that I cannot vote, so you need to vote for this because I don't really have a vote for this. So please do vote against this horrible, horrible mistake. Thank you.
Thank you. And that'll be a hard act to follow. Susie Bell?
Yes, I'm sorry, I've been sitting so long, I'm paralyzed.
Yeah, I know. It's Monday night.
Going back to Dallas
Do you want
tonight.
to sit down and have me hold this for you? Okay.
Perfectly good.
All right.
Sorry. I'm
I'm Susie Bell Gosling. I'm testifying as a member and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Texas regarding the license application for the consolidated interim storage facility as been described today. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today and thank you for allowing us to share the League of Women Voters of Texas' position on this issue. We are very concerned about many aspects of the high-level radioactive waste disposal, the storage proposal. Most importantly, the health, safety of people and the environment, and the transportation risks. Our position on hazardous materials and high-level radioactive materials, like other league positions, is derived through a lengthy and thoughtful process involving the participation of 25 city leagues representing our members and supporters throughout the state of Texas. We support the League of Women Voters of New Mexico. Neither Holtec International, WCS, or any other company should be allowed to develop an interim storage location without a plan for a permanent disposal site and a robust system for storage. Doing otherwise would not protect local residents, their health, or the environment from having this temporary site become a permanent site. What is the plan for locating a permanent repository for this hazardous material? More specific information is needed by verifiable independent third party to authenticate the suitability of the proposed New Mexico and Texas sites by using data accumulated with most up-to-date research in addition to the past data that's been accumulated. A conflict of interest and the appearance of a conflict of interest should be avoided. Transportation issues are of great concern. We have a number of questions concerning those in addition to the ones that have been presented. Accidents do happen. They said that there would be, the Titanic would not sink, and it did. I can go on with numerous examples. What would be the standards and guarantees for the railroads routes for this highly radiated material? What would be the financial assurances provided by the railroad companies, the states, and Holtec International? How would the financial assurances be monitored? Who would inspect and monitor these systems? What would be the penalties if the safety and financial assurances are not adequate? There are many questions that are posed in the paper that I will submit online. I would also like to say, since the time is so limited, the same questions for the railroads apply for the roads and the highways that would be carrying the heavy, high-level radioactive waste. How much transport of high-level radioactive waste would be on the highways? Exactly, really. Heavy loads do more damage to highways than the lighter traffic. We can learn from past accidents. In fact, there was a comment about the incidents in Sweden, and 80% of the reindeer had to be killed after the Chernobyl site. And every year, reindeer have to be killed in Sweden because of continued contamination, even though that was over 30 years ago. The wind carried the radiation across Sweden, Europe, and the Northern Hemisphere. That can happen also in Texas and in this country. Thank you for having the public comment meeting in Roswell, Hobbs, and Carlsbad, New Mexico. However, none of these cities has easy access by airlines and are accessible to most people. Meetings should be held in Dallas and Fort Worth, a major hub of transportation by rail, San Antonio, El Paso, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, in addition to major cities across the U.S. that would be likely high radiation transport routes. Thank you for considering the League of Women Voters' comments.
Thank you. Thank you.
Soya Stevens.
How about Alfredo Dominguez? Alfredo? And then we're going to try Stephen, Picha. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but Alfredo, welcome.
My name is Abel Dominguez. I lived in Roswell since 1980. I thought a lot about what I was going to say here tonight. And then when I get here and look at the slideshow, and it says, this purpose is determined that the safe to build and operate a consolidated interim storage facility at the proposed site. And I cannot conceive any stretch of the imagination how transporting this nuclear waste across Texas and the nation is ever going to be safe. Each canister is a target for terrorists that want to do us harm. Terrorists have already used our airlines against us, our postal system, to try to hack our internet to control the nuclear reactors. They are, you're giving them a giant bomb. All they have to do is formulate a shape charge, and they won't set it off at the Holtec site. They'll set it off at the major metropolitan centers. And probably there is nothing that can stop. If that happens, there's nothing that will clean it up ever. Licensing the site for 40 years for 500 canisters will not help alleviate the problem, a permanent solution there, to just create another site that's going to be contaminated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And is Stephen Pitchuk here? Tom Gorman?
Tom already spoke.
Abraham Guevara. Cole Fuller. Okay. How about Morton Carl? K-R-A-L? Okay. Larry Martin? Larry?
Am I the last one?
No, that honor goes to Bill Madison, if Bill is here. Bill here? Yeah, Bill will be our last speaker.
I didn't see anyone coming after me, that's why I said. I'm sort of neutral on this. I didn't hear about it until yesterday. So I think the publicity was lacking, although I was obviously out of the loop. I suggest, just like Mr. Jennings said, that you get a bigger room. I mean, there's a theater down here with 400 seats in it. Instead of in this little dinky little room here where there's not enough to argue with. I realize you have a problem. You got all this waste sitting around on the East Coast, West Coast, that somebody wants to put somewhere else. And that's usually the politicians in those states, not here. Okay? On the other hand, I don't want the politicians in Austin and Santa Fe determining whether or not Roswell gets something. Okay? That may be against a lot of the people who have come in from Santa Fe and have an argument, but southeast and southern New Mexico always seem to get on the short end of the stick in the politics in the state. In Roswell, we have an aquifer. We don't share it with Clovis or Midland. I don't think we share it with Artesia. It's our own little lake down there, and it's very valuable. If it should be polluted, Roswell will dry up and blow away because industry will leave. I mean, agriculture will leave, and we're gone. The importance of maintaining a clean aquifer, and that would be a problem if something happened, would be catastrophic. The reason, or the question I have is the location near an aquifer, which I might have missed when I said that. And also, does this place have to be cooled? I would imagine so. And the problems with Fukushima, Chernobyl, were cooling problems. In Fukushima, there's still a spot where no human can endure. It's so hot and so polluted. And they don't know what to do with it. So if you have a nuclear problem where you can no longer cool your trash, you are in serious trouble. And it will eventually be like the old movie that was on the movie. I don't have much more to say other than that, but if something happened where the cooling system fails, such as a massive grid failure in this country, you would have approximately 99 uncooled nuclear bombs. Okay? You're talking about half the country totally out of it forever. That's what they're trying to prevent, I think. But I don't see anyone arguing the case that you have to maintain these places to be cooled. No one talks about it, but that's in nature, maybe not. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for those comments. So,
My name is Bill Madison.
Can you speak
let
into
me
the?
get you in there.
My name is Bill Madison.
Okay.
I'm from Roswell. I live in northern New Mexico also.
Hold the mic closer.
I can't hear you. There.
My name is Bill Madison. I live in northern New Mexico. I have property in Roswell that I take care of. I was at the WIP hearings when the WIP hearings came. And I don't know, none of you obviously were there, you're too young. We were told that would be all it would be in New Mexico. And there would be no high level radiation in New Mexico. That there would be no accidents. It was fail safe, 100% fail safe. So it's hard for me to kind of embrace what's going on here, because the government has lied to us, blatant lie. So I think that you should look at that and understand that we've been told one thing, and now all of a sudden there's this new thing that's coming in. A lot of elegant speakers today. There's a lot of information that you folks in this thing that SNU, I'm not aware of it. Sounds kind of interesting. Fracking coming on in the area, and reintroduction of the liquids causing these rivers in Oklahoma. If that happened in the Permian Basin as well could. Obviously there's holes there, and I'm sure you folks are all looking at that. But the really main thing is that we've been lied to. So that's my spiel. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being here and listening to this. And I agree that I just found out about this today, so, but I'm not really in the Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. In about a minute, I'm going to turn it over to the senior NRC official, Brian Smith, who's just going to say a few final words. But I think that I mentioned earlier in the evening that the NRC would not be responding to any comments. Well, there's only one time when they do that, when there were statements or implications about NRC's statutory authority or responsibility, and we don't want people to leave thinking that the NRC regulates something that it doesn't. I think he's going to talk about something like that. But before Brian goes on, I just want to thank all of you for your patience and for your comments tonight. And I have to thank Chief Newberry and his officers again for helping us. And I have to thank Porter's father for bringing Porter in here. Maybe the most sensible sentient being that's here, but I'm not going to go further into that. But Brian, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Jim. I guess for clarification, the one thing there is the WIP side has been mentioned several times, and it's been correlated that the NRC has been involved with that. There's been no NRC involvement with the WIP side. That's totally under the Department of Energy. So we're not a regulator of that side. And just one other thing, clarification. Earlier on in the session, there was a question about, has the NRC ever denied an application? the context of that, the way I took it was an application like the one that we're talking about here, consolidated interim storage facility application. And so that's how I answered the question. There's been 3 of those that have been submitted. One's been approved, one's on hold, and we're reviewing the Holtec one now. But when you look at the NRC as a whole, and we do lots of licensing for lots of different types of uses of material, and we have denied licenses, applications in the past. What typically happens is we ask so many questions, raise so many issues with certain applications that they end up being withdrawn and not pursued any further. So we do, and it gets to the point, or we don't get to the point where we terminate or deny those applications. So those 2 clarifications there. So I just want to thank everyone again for attending the meeting tonight. We appreciate you coming out and staying this late as well. We value all of your comments, and we'll consider those as we prepare our draft EIS. Once the draft EIS is published, I would encourage you to review the document and again provide us any comments you think that we need to complete the document itself. So thank you again, and have a good evening.
Thank you, we're adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.